Chapter 644. The Nangong Yin was unwilling to leave the Fengyue Mountains because he wanted to go to the Saint's Mausoleum. After all, this was a great opportunity. No one would be willing to give it up just like that. However, it had been almost half a month since the Nangong Yin was captured. Now that the jade pendants needed to open the Saint's Mausoleum had been gathered, how could Su Tianze not open the Saint's Mausoleum? Facing Xiao Qin's doubts and questions, the Nangong Yin replied without hesitation. Impossible. Su Tianze can't open the Saint's Mausoleum now. Why? The Nangong Yin's answer was very certain. Hearing this, Xiao Qin asked. Because according to the information in the jade pendants, in order to open the Saint's Mausoleum, not only do you need to gather 2 jade pendants, but you also need to open it on the night of the full moon. In the past half a month, there hasn't been a full moon. I've checked before. The nearest full moon is 2 days later, so Su Tianze can't open the Saint's Mausoleum now. Since the Nangong Yin had already told everyone, there was no need to hide it anymore. Hearing this, Xiao Qin nodded slightly. If this was the case, then Su Tianze really couldn't open the Saint's Mausoleum. In other words, Xiao Qin and the others still had a chance to go to the Saint's Mausoleum and compete with Su Tianze for the inheritance of the Saint's Mausoleum. In the face of such a heaven-defying opportunity, everyone present was excited, but no one spoke. Everyone looked at Xiao Qin, waiting for Xiao Qin's decision. Sensing everyone's gaze, Xiao Qin pondered for a moment, then smiled and said, "In that case, let's go and take a look. Since the meat is already in front of us, I think you guys won't be satisfied if you don't take a bite." Since they were sure that the Saint's Mausoleum had not been opened yet, they naturally had to fight for it. Hearing Xiao Qin's words, everyone was immediately delighted and smiled. Since they had decided to go to the Saint's Mausoleum to take a look, Xiao Qin asked about the Saint's Mausoleum. According to the Nangong Yin, the entrance of the Saint's Mausoleum was located in the north of the Fengyue mountain range. It wasn't far from where they were now, but it wasn't close either, the Saint's Mausoleums. So it could only be opened on a full moon, and every saint in the history of the Tiana continent was definitely recorded, and it was impossible for them to be nameless. That was why Xiao Qin asked Nangong Yin who the owner of the Holy Mausoleum was. But in the face of Xiao Qin's question, the Nangong Yin shook his head this time, indicating that he didn't know, because the content of the jade pendant didn't mention the identity of the Saint's Mausoleum's owner. He didn't know who the owner of the Saint's Mausoleum was. Moreover, the Nangong Yin had checked some ancient books, but there was no record of the Saint's Mausoleum in the Fengyue mountain range, so he couldn't find any clues. "You don't know who left it?" In the face of Gu Lingyao's answer, Xiao Qin whispered softly. Then, without saying anything more, he led the group towards the Saint's Mausoleum. This time, the group didn't rush. After all, there was plenty of time. Moreover, rushing would consume a lot of energy. In order to deal with the Saint's Mausoleum, Xiao Qin hoped that everyone could be in good condition. Only then could they face the possible threats in the Saint's Mausoleum. It could be said that this was Xiao Qin's first time coming into contact with the Saint's Mausoleum. Previously, in the Tianqian continent and the Tianqi sect, Xiao Qin had seen Xiao Sheng and Xu Feng's remnant soul, but that wasn't their mausoleum. Therefore, along the way, Xiao Qin also asked the Nangong Yin a lot about the Saint's Mausoleum. The Nangong Yin obviously knew more about the Saint's Mausoleum than Xiao Qin. According to her, every Saint's Mausoleum was an independent space. After all, when one reached the Saint realm, one would have a preliminary grasp of the power of space. Using the power of law, one could construct an independent space. Therefore, under normal circumstances, when a saint fell, they would use their entire life's strength to construct a small world as their resting place after death. At the same time, in this small world, many saints would also leave behind tests and opportunities, as well as their own inheritances for future generations to obtain. After all, no one would want their abilities to disappear just like that. Passing the tests would allow one to obtain the opportunities and inheritances left behind by the saint. In general, the saint's mausoleum mainly depended on the saint's personality. Some saints had a gentle personality, so the mausoleum they left behind would basically not be dangerous. so it'll only be some tests. However, if one encountered a mausoleum left behind by a saint with a tyrannical or eccentric personality, then it was hard to say. It might be filled with difficulties, or it might be filled with danger at every step. Therefore, the Nangong Yin didn't dare to be certain about the saint's mausoleum that everyone was about to head to. After all, she didn't know who the owner of the saint's mausoleum was and had no way of knowing the saint's personality. From the layout of the saint's mausoleum, one could tell the saint's personality when he was alive. This was something that Xiao Chun didn't deny. After walking and stopping for a day, Xiao Chun and the others finally arrived at a place not far from the saint's mausoleum under the command of Nangong Yin. Not rashly approaching the saint's mausoleum, Xiao Chun had everyone find a secluded place to rest. Now that the two jade pendants were in the hands of Su Tianzi, they couldn't let Su Tianzi discover their tracks at this time. After all, they still needed to rely on Su Tianzi to open the saint's mausoleum. As for snatching the jade pendants in Su Tianzi's hands, Xiao Chun had also considered this point, but it wasn't realistic. First of all, Su Tianzi was the seventh direct disciple of Tianyue's sacred sect, so he definitely wasn't an idiot. Regardless of whether or not they could defeat him, if they acted rashly, it was very likely that they would alert the enemy and even cause trouble. If the matter of the saint's mausoleum was exposed, then things would become even more troublesome. Therefore, according to Xiao Chen's plan, everyone only needed to hide nearby and not be discovered by Su Tianzi or his subordinates. When Su Tianzi opened the saint's mausoleum, Xiao Chun and the others would appear and directly enter the saint's mausoleum. Because at that time, the entrance to the saint's mausoleum would have already opened, and even if Su Tianzi discovered them, he wouldn't have any way to stop them. Moreover, Xiao Chun firmly believed that as long as Su Tianzi wasn't an idiot, after the entrance to the saint's mausoleum opened, he wouldn't stop them even if he watched them enter. Even if they wanted to fight, they could only fight inside the saint's mausoleum. It was impossible for a battle to break out outside. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 645. There was less than a day left before the full moon that Nangong Yin had mentioned. According to Xiao Chen's instructions, everyone did not act rashly. Instead, they waited quietly in place, waiting for Su Tianzi to open the saint's mausoleum. While adjusting their breathing and waiting for the saint's mausoleum to open, Nangong Yin took the initiative to approach Xiao Chun and Gu Lingyao. She first glanced at Gu Lingyao. In fact, Nangong Yin already knew that Gu Lingyao was a woman disguised as a man. Wait, how could a man be so delicate and pretty? Moreover, a woman's intuition was very accurate. As soon as she saw Gu Lingyao, Nangong Yin's intuition told her that Gu Lingyao was a woman. Smiling at Gu Lingyao, Nangong Yin looked at Xiao Chun and asked, "Are you sure that if we continue to wait like this, we will definitely be able to enter the saint's mausoleum?" "I'm sure." Hearing this, Xiao Chun slowly opened his eyes and smiled. "Why?" Nangong Yin asked. "It's very simple. Su Tianzi still doesn't know that you've successfully escaped danger, so he won't be on guard against you. In this way, he will definitely open the saint's mausoleum on the full moon as planned, because Su Tianzi knows that the Qingma gang can't hold you for too long. Therefore, this time, Su Tianzi must open the saint's mausoleum. Otherwise, when you escape danger, who can guarantee that you won't spread the news of the saint's mausoleum to vent your anger? If Su Tianzi still hasn't obtained the opportunity and inheritance in the saint's mausoleum, then wouldn't he be in big trouble?" Xiao Chun replied. Hearing this, Nangong Yin nodded in agreement, but soon asked, "Even if you're right and Su Tianzi opens the saint's mausoleum according to plan, how can you guarantee that he won't choose to fight to the death with us when the time comes?" "That's even simpler. If we fight to the death outside the holy mausoleum, what if the shockwaves from the battle attract other people? Wouldn't that increase the number of competitors for no reason? Moreover, if they were to fight to the death outside the sacred spirit world, what would they do if an accident happened and the entrance closed? Su Tianzi will not gamble in the holy tomb, so he can only watch us enter the holy tomb. Even if he is angry, he can only vent it in the holy tomb. Xiao Chun said. Everything had been predicted by Xiao Chun. While chatting with Xiao Chun, the sky gradually darkened. Night fell, and a full moon hung high in the sky. Looking at the full moon in the sky, Xiao Chun got up, patted the dust off his clothes, and turned to the crowd with a smile. Let's go. It's time to act. As usual, pay attention to hiding. Before the entrance to the holy tomb is fully opened, we cannot expose our existence. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the 12 Tianfeng Shengzong disciples, as well as the 2 women, Gu Lingyao and Nangong Yin, all got up one after another. Then, under Xiao Chen's lead, the group carefully walked towards the entrance of the holy tomb. Because they could not be discovered by Su Tianze, Xiao Chen's group did not move quickly. It took them more than half an hour to reach the entrance of the holy tomb. Hiding in the bushes, Xiao Chun looked at the entrance of the holy mausoleum that Nangong Yin had mentioned. At this time, the entrance of the holy mausoleum did not seem to be anything special. However, Xiao Chun saw more than 10 young people standing around the entrance quietly. These people were wearing very ordinary clothes, but Xiao Chun was sure that they were all disciples of the Tianyue sacred sect. In the middle of the crowd, a handsome young man stood proudly. Seeing this person, Nangong Yin whispered to Xiao Chun, "He is Su Tianze." This handsome young man was Su Tianze. Hearing Nangong Yin's words, Xiao Chun looked at Su Tianze with interest. Previously, Nangong Yin had also introduced Su Tianze to Xiao Chun. Although this person was now only the 7th pro-disciple of the Tianyue sacred sect, he was known as the strongest genius in the history of the Tianyue sacred sect. With such a reputation, of course, it was not groundless. Nangong Yin had also secretly investigated Su Tianze's experience. Regarding this, Nangong Yin could not help but admire him. Su Tianze was only 27 years old this year, the same age as Xiao Chun. In just 2 years after entering the Tianyue sacred sect, Su Tianze had already become the 7th pro-disciple of the Tianyue sacred sect. It could be said that since Su Tianze was a child, he had been progressing triumphantly, surpassing his peers one by one. Even after joining the Tianyue holy sect, Su Tianze was like a shining new star, quickly blooming his own brilliance in the face of the geniuses of the holy sect. In the Tianyue sacred sect, more than one elder had evaluated Su Tianze like this. If this child does not fall, he may become the holy son in the future. To be able to become the holy son, this evaluation was already high enough. Some people even predicted that in less than 3 years, Su Tianze would certainly rush into the top 3 pro-disciples of the Tianyue sacred sect. This was a person who was doted on by thousands. At the same time, his brilliance overshadowed countless disciples of the Tianyue sacred sect. Even the other pro-disciples would be overshadowed by Su Tianze. Finally, he saw the true appearance of the person who was known as the strongest genius in the history of the Tianyue sacred sect. He secretly sized up Su Tianze. Facing Su Tianze, Xiao Chen honestly felt that this person was indeed not simple. His temperament was very strong. Moreover, his eyes were bright and full of expression. His ink-like black hair danced in the wind. Purely based on appearance, this Su Tianze was indeed a talent. Of course, Xiao Chen was more concerned about his cultivation. They were the same age, but Su Tianze had already reached the minor success of the Dao validation realm. Such a cultivation was indeed rare. Moreover, Xiao Chun was sure that Su Tianze's cultivation was 100% cultivated step by himself. He had never relied on the power of elixirs, and his foundation was extremely solid. In the face of any pro-disciple of the sacred sect, one did not need to doubt whether their cultivation was fake, because no pro-disciple would do such a stupid thing. For the sake of a quick breakthrough in cultivation, damaging one's own martial arts foundation was something that a personal disciple would never do. Even if pro-disciples wanted to break through, they would constantly suppress it and repeatedly condense it until they really reached the limit. Only then would they choose to break through. After secretly sizing up Su Tianze and waiting patiently for nearly an hour, Su Tianze, who was not far away, looked up at the full moon in the sky and then said to the person next to him, "We can begin." After speaking, Su Qianze took out two ancient jade pendants from his storage ring. Seeing these two jade pendants, Nangong Yan's eyes flashed with a fiery light. Su Qianze is about to open the sacred tomb. Don't worry. Wait until he completely opens the entrance to the sacred tomb, then we will act. Hearing Nangong Yan's words, Xiao Chun whispered, indicating that she should not be anxious. A cooked duck cannot fly away. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 646. Sensing that Nangong Yan was a little agitated, Xiao Chun gestured for her to calm down. Su Qianze was preparing to open the holy mausoleum. This was the most crucial moment, and they couldn't let him feel anything wrong. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Nangong Yan nodded slightly. Then, she held her breath and stared at the two jade pendants in Su Qianze's hands. Perhaps it was because he was too confident in himself, or perhaps it was because Su Qianze believed that Nangong Yan was still in the hands of the Qingma gang. Furthermore, he had sent 3 Biming family experts to take charge of the array. Therefore, Su Qianze did not suspect anything and directly chose to open the holy mausoleum. Su Qianze held the 2 halves of the jade pendants in each hand and slowly put them together. As the 2 halves of the jade pendants merged into one, a gust of wind blew. In front of Su Qianze, 2 stone pillars rose from the ground as if they had grown out of the ground. The stone pillars were not very tall, only 3 meters tall. However, they were completely black and gave off an extremely sinister feeling as soon as they appeared. Following the appearance of the 2 stone pillars, Su Qianze's eyes flashed with a smile. With a wave of his hand, the jade pendant in his hand shot directly towards the middle of the 2 stone pillars. What was strange was that when the jade pendant flew to the empty space between the 2 stone pillars, it seemed to be embedded in the pillar and stopped steadily in the air. The jade pendant stopped firmly in the middle of the 2 stone pillars. Soon, the 2 stone pillars emitted a faint black light. This black light was like ink, continuously extending and finally connecting the 2 stone pillars. At the same time, a black door that flowed like liquid appeared in the middle of the 2 stone pillars. This was the entrance to the holy mausoleum. Now that the entrance had been opened, the corners of Su Qianze's mouth rose slightly, revealing a faint smile. "Everyone, follow me into the holy mausoleum." With that, Su Qianze prepared to enter the holy mausoleum. At the same time, Xiao Chun led Gu Lingyao and the others out of the bushes, a faint smile on his face. This must be Senior Marshal Brother Su Qianze. Hearing the sudden voice, Su Qianze and the others immediately turned their heads to look. The more than 10 people of the Tianyue sacred sect took out their weapons and stared at Xiao Chun and the others as if they were facing a great enemy. Su Qianze's face turned ugly when so many people suddenly appeared. However, when he saw the Nangong Yan, Su Qianze sneered instead. "Miss Nangong, I didn't expect you to be able to escape. Why? Is Senior Marshal Brother Su disappointed that I escaped?" Hearing Su Qianze's words, the Nangong Yan sneered. "It's not that I'm disappointed, just a little surprised." With a smile on his face, Su Qianze replied, then turned his gaze to Xiao Chun. He also saw that the Nangong Yan group was led by Xiao Chun. He sneered. "Who is this friend? A disciple of the Tianfeng Shengzong?" Xiao Chun of the Tianfeng Shengzong. "Senior Marshal Brother Su is too polite." Seeing this, Xiao Chun said with a smile, "Oh, so it's Junior Marshal Brother Xiao Chun. Why? Is Junior Marshal Brother Xiao Chun also interested in the Holy Mausoleum?" Of course. Who wouldn't be interested in the Holy Mausoleum? Moreover, it's better to enjoy it together than to enjoy it alone. Since we've met Senior Marshal Brother Su these past few days, why don't we explore the Holy Mausoleum together? Ha! Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Su Qianze laughed loudly. The conversation between the two was like a meeting between friends, without the slightest killing intent or anger. Accompanied by Su Qianze's laughter, a Tianyue sacred sect disciple beside him shouted coldly, "Who Who do you think you are to enter the holy mausoleum with us? I'll give you 3 breaths of time. If you don't scram, then die here." Naturally, he didn't want Xiao Chun and the others to enter the holy mausoleum. After hearing the Tianyu's sacred sect disciples' words, Xiao Chun completely ignored him and didn't even look at him. His gaze was always on Su Tianzi. What? Senior Marshal Brother Su doesn't want us to enter the holy mausoleum? If that's the case, then we'll have to go all out. The opportunity is right in front of us. As a saying goes, cutting off one's opportunity is like killing one's father. In that case, we can only go all out. Who do you think you are to say that? If you want to fight, then let's fight. Do you think we're afraid of you? Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the Tianyu's sacred sect disciple once again snorted coldly. At the same time, he took a step forward and got into a fighting stance. It was obvious that this Tianyu's sacred sect disciple should be a core disciple. His strength wasn't weak, but that was it. As this person's voice fell, Su Tianzi's laughter also slowly dissipated. Staring at Xiao Chun, Su Tianzi's eyes flashed a cold light. "You really dare to fight with me? Of course not. As the saying goes, people die for wealth and birds die for food. For this heaven-defying opportunity, what's there to be afraid of?" Xiao Chun replied with a smile. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Su Tianzi went silent. At this time, the Tianyu's sacred sect core disciple's patience had obviously reached its limit. Just as he was about to make a move, he was stopped by Su Tianzi. "Stop, Senior Brother Su." After being stopped by Su Tianzi, the core disciple said with a puzzled look. But before he could speak, Su Tianzi waved his hand and interrupted him. "Don't say any more." Just as Xiao Chun thought, Su Tianzi couldn't make a move here. For Su Tianzi, nothing was more important than the opportunity in the holy mausoleum. After preparing for so long, Su Tianzi absolutely wouldn't allow the slightest accident to happen at this final juncture. Therefore, in the face of Xiao Chun and the others, Su Tianzi's only choice was to let them enter the holy mausoleum and then deal with them. After a slight warning, the coldness in Su Tianzi's eyes quickly dissipated. A smile once again appeared on his face, and he said, "In that case, let's go together. But Junior Brother Xiao, the holy mausoleum is full of danger. If any accident happens, you may not be able to come out. So Junior Brother Xiao should think twice before you act." Haha, that's all I have to say. Junior Brother Xiao, think about it yourself. We'll take our leave first. Forcefully resisting the urge to kill Xiao Chun and the others, Su Tianzi's voice faded. Without waiting for Xiao Chun's reply, he led his people and strode through the black door. Watching Su Tianzi and the others leave, Xiao Chun naturally didn't take the threat just not to heart. With a slight smile, Xiao Chun said to the people behind him, "Let's go, we'll go in too." With that said, Xiao Chun took the lead. Gu Lingyao and Nangong Yin flanked him on the left and right, while the 12 Tianfeng Shengzong disciples followed behind. The group also entered the holy mausoleum through the black door. As everyone entered, the black door leading to the holy mausoleum soon disappeared, along with the 2 jade pendants. Everything returned to normal, as if no one had been here at all. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 647. The originally hostile parties entered the holy mausoleum one after another, and everything soon returned to normal. No one knew that this was actually the entrance to a saint's mausoleum. Passing through the black door, Xiao Chun and the others felt as if they had traveled through space. When their vision recovered, they were already inside the holy mausoleum. In the distance was a huge black volcano. From the top of the volcano, magma would spurt out from time to time. The ground looked as if it had been burned by magma all year round, dried up and cracked. The sky was also gray, and even if there were some trees, only their trunks were left, almost dead. Xiao Chun didn't expect the inside of the holy mausoleum to be such a scene. However, Xiao Chun obviously didn't have much time to pay attention to this because Su Tianzi and the others were in front of Xiao Chun. Obviously, Su Tianzi had deliberately waited here for Xiao Chun. Outside the holy mausoleum, Su Tianzi couldn't make a move but now it was different. Everyone had entered the holy mausoleum, and the entrance was closed. No matter how much they fought, no one would discover them. Su Tianzi's eyes flashed with a strong killing intent as he looked at Xiao Chun with a sneer and said indifferently, "Junior brother Xiao, I already said that the holy mausoleum is full of danger, but it seems that you didn't listen to me." Su Tianzi's words were full of killing intent and threat, but in response, Xiao Chun just smiled and said, "As the saying goes, people die for wealth and birds die for food. Even if there is a threat, I can't just give up on this opportunity in front of me. Oh, I'm afraid Junior Brother won't have a chance. This place will eventually become your burial ground," Su Tianzi said directly, no longer needing to hide his intentions. Su Tianzi had coveted this holy mausoleum for a long time, and no one could snatch it from him. Therefore, when Xiao Chun and the others appeared, Su Tianzi had already decided that as long as Xiao Chun and the others dared to step into the holy mausoleum, they would be killed without mercy. Moreover, no one knew about the existence of this holy mausoleum. If he killed Xiao Chun, Nangong Yin, and the others here, even if the family Nangong and Tianfeng Shengzong wanted to investigate, they couldn't. As long as Su Tianzi killed the remaining members of the Qingma gang one by one, there would be no evidence. Therefore, Su Tianzi didn't have any worries. Su Tianzi already had murderous intent in his heart. Xiao Chen had expected this, so he did not panic in the slightest. At the same time, the others behind the two of them drew their weapons one after another. A great battle was about to break out. The atmosphere became more and more tense. After a few breaths, along with Su Tianzi's low shout, the people of Tianyue's sacred sect directly chose to attack. In this regard, Nangong Yin, Gu Lingyao, and the others naturally wouldn't allow themselves to be captured without a fight. Nangong Yin and Gu Lingyao dealt with the two core disciples of Tianyue's sacred sect. Everyone immediately began to fight. Obviously, Su Tianzi wanted to directly kill Xiao Chun and the others here. Watching the outbreak of the battle, Su Tianzi's body gradually emitted a terrifying aura. The killing intent in his eyes continued to gather, and his aura continued to rise. He sneered and said, "You, a mere core disciple, dare to ruin my plans? Today is the day you and your group die." Su Tianzi knew the top 10 core disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong. Xiao Chen wasn't among them, so Su Tianzi naturally thought that Xiao Chen was a core disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong. Of course, Su Tianzi obviously hadn't heard that Chu Xuan had been killed by Xiao Chun. At the same time, Xiao Chun had become the 10th direct disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong. Su Tianzi didn't wait for Xiao Chen's reply. He didn't want to give Xiao Chun any chance at all. He directly shot out a palm without holding back. A giant palm formed by spiritual power immediately fell from the sky and fiercely suppressed Xiao Chun. "And go to hell." Annihilation Palm. Su Tianzi used an upper-grade Earth-level martial arts technique right from the start, and it had already reached the level of perfection. The giant palm that covered the sky seemed to want to crush Xiao Chun into pieces. Facing Su Tianzi's Annihilation Palm, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that even the top core disciple wouldn't be able to withstand it. Therefore, Su Tianzi was very confident that his palm could definitely kill Xiao Chun on the spot. However, facing Su Tianzi's confident attack, Xiao Chun's expression didn't change at all. Facing the Annihilation Palm that was falling from the sky, Xiao Chun directly used the Tai Yi sword finger. Seeing that Xiao Chun actually chose to resist his Annihilation Palm, Su Tianzi coldly snorted and said, "Humph, you're courting death." Su Tianzi naturally didn't believe that Xiao Chun could withstand his Annihilation Palm. If Xiao Chun wasn't a pro-disciple, Xiao Chun wouldn't even be qualified to fight with him. As Su Tianzi's voice fell, the two attacks fiercely collided. Although Xiao Chun was very confident in himself, he had to admit that Su Tianzi's strength was very strong. At least he wasn't a match for him now. As the 7th core disciple of the Tianyue sacred sect, Su Tianzi's strength was obviously above Yu Cheng and Lien Su. Therefore, with Xiao Chen's current strength, it was almost impossible for him to defeat Su Tianzi. However, relying on his tempered battle body, it was still possible for him to fight with Su Tianze. In a head-on collision, Xiao Chun was at a disadvantage. However, after using the Tai sword finger twice in a row, Xiao Chun finally blocked Su Tianze's annihilation palm. The spiritual energy giant palm was directly defeated by Xiao Chun. Seeing this, Su Tianze's eyes involuntarily flashed with a touch of horror. It was impossible. How could Xiao Chun block his attack? He looked at Xiao Chun with doubt and coldness. Facing Su Tianze's gaze, Xiao Chun showed a faint smile on his face. Sorry, I'm actually also a pro-disciple. Xiao Chun naturally knew why Su Tianze was shocked. From the beginning to the end, this guy had regarded him as an ant. However, when he heard Xiao Chun's words, Su Tianze had to believe it, because Xiao Chun was actually able to block his annihilation palm. Although he was at a disadvantage, to be able to successfully block it was no longer something that a core disciple of the Tianfeng Sheng Zone could do. Looking coldly at Xiao Chun, Su Tianze said indifferently, "You shouldn't be among the top 10 pro-disciples of the Tianfeng Sheng Zone." As competitors, Su Tianze naturally knew a lot about the top 10 pro-disciples of the Tianfeng Sheng Zone. However, there was no such person as Xiao Chun among them. Hearing Su Tianze's words, Xiao Chun smiled slightly and said, "That's really unfortunate. Recently, I defeated He Chuxuan and became the 10th pro-disciple. It seems that senior brother Su's news is not very good." At this point, Xiao Chun naturally did not need to hide his identity. Hearing this, Su Tianze's eyes flashed with a touch of surprise. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 648. Su Tianze naturally knew He Chuxuan. Not only He Chuxuan, but the information of each of the top 10 direct disciples of Tianfeng Sheng Zone could be said to be very clear to Su Tianze. Of course, regarding the top 10 direct disciples of Tianyue's sacred sect, Tianfeng Sheng Zone naturally had a corresponding introduction. At this time, when he heard Xiao Chun say that he defeated He Chuxuan today and was promoted to one of the top 10 direct disciples of Tianfeng Sheng Zone, Su Tianze did not have much doubt about this. After all, with Xiao Chun's strength, it was indeed possible for him to defeat He Chuxuan. It was only a moment of astonishment, but Su Tianze quickly recovered. The smile on his face did not diminish as he said, "Oh, is that so? It seems that I really underestimated junior brother Xiao. But so what? Do you think that a mere He Chuxuan can compare with me?" The meaning of Su Tianze's words was very simple. Even if Xiao Chun defeated He Chuxuan, so what? Su Tianze's strength, especially that idiot He Chuxuan, could not be compared to his. Xiao Chun could defeat He Chuxuan, but it did not mean that he could defeat Su Tianze. Hearing this, Xiao Chun did not refute. After the fight, just now, Xiao Chun also admitted that his current strength was not Su Tianze's opponent. However, was Xiao Chun's purpose to defeat Su Tianze here? Obviously not. Xiao Chun had never thought of defeating Su Tianze. There was only one purpose in coming here, and that was to get a share of the holy tomb. It could also be said that he wanted to snatch food from Su Tianze's mouth. Therefore, Xiao Chun did not need to defeat Su Tianze at all. He only needed to make Su Tianze give up the idea of fighting to the death with him. It was precisely because he did not want to fight to the death with Su Tianze that Xiao Chun was actually very relaxed. It was not difficult for Xiao Chun to delay Su Tianze and entangle him. Facing Xiao Chun, who was still fearless, the killing intent in Su Tianze's heart grew stronger. Then, without saying anything, he moved his feet and directly attacked Xiao Chun. Facing Su Tianze's attack, Xiao Chun did not hesitate to move forward. The two immediately engaged in a fierce battle. The power of the battle between two direct disciples was naturally not something that ordinary disciples could contend with. Therefore, without the slightest hesitation, Nangong Yin, Guling Yao, and the others immediately distanced themselves from Xiao Chun to avoid being affected by the aftermath of the battle between the two. As they fought fiercely, they retreated into the distance. However, at the same time, Nangong Yin's expression was very shocked. She had clearly heard the conversation between Xiao Chun and Su Tianze. She never would have thought that Xiao Chun would actually be Tianfeng Shengzong's 10th direct disciple. He defeated He Chuxuan and became the 10th direct disciple. Nan Gongyin thought to herself as she unconsciously looked at Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun's identity somewhat surprised Nan Gongyin. One must know that the first core disciple and the 10th direct disciple seemed to be only one step apart, but the difference in status between the two was like the difference between clouds and mud. It was not an exaggeration to say that in the face of a direct disciple, even her father, the head of the family Nangong, had to treat them with respect. However, in the face of a core disciple, with the strength of the family Nangong, it was much more casual. The fierce battle continued. After knowing Xiao Chun's true identity, Su Tianze did not have the slightest carelessness. He attacked with all his strength in order to defeat Xiao Chun in the shortest time possible. Unfortunately, relying on the strength of the tempered battle body, even though Xiao Chun fell into a disadvantageous position, there was no limit to his defeat. After attacking for a long time without success, Su Tianze's face gradually darkened. He thought to himself viciously, "Damn it, how can this guy's body be so strong?" And, after hundreds of fierce exchanges, Su Tianze had fully experienced the strength of Xiao Chun's body, which was comparable to that of a demon beast. At the same time, Su Tianze gradually became aware of Xiao Chun's true purpose. From the beginning of the battle until now, Xiao Chun had no intention of competing with him at all. He was only blindly defending in order to not be defeated, only defending and never counterattacking. In this way, relying on the tempered battle body, Su Tianze really had no way to defeat Xiao Chun in a short time. Moreover, if the battle continued for a long time, Su Tianze's consumption would be considerable. This guy doesn't want to compete with me. He just wants to share the opportunities in the Holy Mausoleum with me. Damn it. Su Tianze quickly understood what was going on. As a result, the anger in his heart rose like a volcanic eruption. In Su Tianze's view, what qualifications did Xiao Chun have to share the opportunities in the Holy Mausoleum with him? An ant actually dared to snatch food from the tiger's mouth. With this thought, Su Tianze's attacks became fiercer and fiercer. At the same time, the pressure on Xiao Chun naturally increased. Su Tianze, who was bitterly holding the upper hand, was already in a state of madness, as if killing Xiao Chun would not be enough to quell the hatred in his heart. However, although he had completely suppressed Xiao Chun and injured him, Su Tianze was still a step away from delivering a fatal blow to Xiao Chun. The battle became more and more intense, but there was still no sign of it ending. Xiao Chun was not worried, but Su Tianze was not. The prolonged battle was extremely unfavorable to Su Tianze because it meant that he would either have to waste time here with Xiao Chun, or he would have to make concessions and give Xiao Chun a share of the opportunities in the Holy Mausoleum. No one can touch my fortuitous encounter. No one. The anger in his heart grew deeper and deeper. How could Su Tianze be willing to give up such a fat piece of meat to Xiao Chun? The fierce battle continued, but at this moment, the Holy Mausoleum suddenly changed. The black volcano in the distance began to erupt with hot magma. The magma poured down the mountain peak, and wherever it passed, the ground seemed to be roasted. Bursts of white smoke slowly rose. Smoke filled the air, and the temperature rapidly rose. Moreover, the magma continued to spread to the periphery of the Holy Mausoleum, showing signs of swallowing the entire place. The magma continued to spread to the periphery where Xiao Chun and the others were. Seeing this, the look in Su Tianze's eyes became increasingly gloomy. At the same time, Xiao Chun opened his mouth to speak. "Senior brother Su, as the saying goes, those who see it have a share. The opportunities in the Holy Mausoleum are meant for those who are fated to obtain them. If you continue to entangle with me like this, I'm afraid we will all die here today." With just you? Su Tianze coldly snorted when he heard Xiao Chun's words. In the face of Su Tianze's cold snort, Xiao Chun smiled non-committally and said, "In terms of combat power, I may not be as good as Senior Brother Su for the time being, But now that the magma is rolling over, if I go all out to delay Senior Brother Sue, I'm afraid Senior Brother Sue will find it difficult to escape. When the time comes, you and I will both perish in this rolling magma." Xiao Qian's words were not false. In terms of strength, he was indeed not Su Tianzi's opponent, but now that the Holy Mausoleum had undergone a great change, if Xiao Qian desperately tried to delay Su Tianzi, Xiao Qian would not even need to do anything, for the two of them would definitely be swallowed by the magma. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 649. Xiao Qian's words didn't sound like a threat at all, as though he was talking about a trivial matter. But the more this was the case, the angrier Su Tianzi became. Since when had Su Tianzi been led by the nose by an ant? He had absolute confidence that he could defeat Xiao Qian, but the current situation was obviously not suitable for him to continue fighting with Xiao Qian. Otherwise, not only would it be a waste of effort, both sides would suffer great losses, and he might even lose his life in the Holy Mausoleum. Everyone knew that the Holy Mausoleum was mysterious and dangerous. Therefore, under normal circumstances, no one would fight to the death in the Holy Mausoleum. Everyone had to preserve their strength to deal with the dangers in the Holy Mausoleum, unless it was a crucial moment to obtain the inheritance and opportunity. Only then would people fight to the death. Take Xiao Qian and Su Tianzi, for example. Everyone had just entered the Holy Mausoleum, and the Holy Mausoleum had suddenly undergone a huge change, so it was obviously not suitable for them to continue fighting. However, Su Tianzi was extremely unwilling to let Xiao Qian go just like that. Xiao Qian looked at Su Tianzi with a faint smile and said indifferently, "Senior Brother Su, you'd better make a decision quickly. You see, the magma is about to rush over. If you continue to hesitate, I can only perish together with Senior Brother Su today. My life doesn't mean much, but Senior Brother Su is known as the strongest genius in Tianfeng Xingzhou. If you die here with me, it will be a little." Xiao Qian didn't continue, but his meaning was clear. There were only two paths before Su Tianzi. Either they continued to fight and perish together, or they gave up the opportunity in the Holy Mausoleum, and both sides competed for it with their own abilities. Upon hearing Xiao Qian's words again, Su Tianzi didn't answer, but cursed angrily in his heart. "Damned ant good, very good, I'll spare your life for now. In any case, there are plenty of opportunities in the Holy Tomb. You're not qualified to compete with me for opportunities." Su Tianzi was furious, but his reason eventually prevailed over his anger. Thinking of this, he took the initiative to retreat and then shouted coldly, "Everyone stop and avoid the magma." Su Tianzi's words obviously meant that he had given up. After weighing the pros and cons, Su Tianzi finally gave up the idea of fighting to the death with Xiao Qian. Along with his words, the people from Tianyue's sacred sect took the initiative to leave the battlefield and soared into the air to avoid the lava. At the same time, Nangong Yin, Guling Yao, and the others quickly came to Xiao Qian's side. The two sides stood in the air and faced each other, but no one attacked. The magma below quickly spread to every corner of the Holy Mausoleum. Although the people standing proudly in the sky avoided the invasion of the magma, the terrifyingly high temperature still forced them to circulate the spiritual energy in their body to resist. Fortunately, the magma here is not formed by earth fire. Otherwise, I'm afraid we would all be finished. Compared to the others, Xiao Qian had a deeper understanding of the Holy Mausoleum. Previously, Xiao Qian was fortunate enough to go to Tianfeng Xingzhou to cultivate. At that time, he had to rely on the heavenly flame, sacred fire talisman given to him by Yifeng to resist the burning of the earth fire. Fortunately, the magma here was not formed by earth fire. Otherwise, even if they managed to avoid the magma, they certainly wouldn't be able to resist the terrifying heat of the earth fire. While resisting the extreme heat rising from the magma, they were also on guard against the other party's sudden attack. The two sides faced each other, but Su Tianzi's gaze was fixed on Xiao Qian. In this regard, Xiao Qian was naturally not to be outdone. With a light smile on his face, he met Su Tianzi's gaze. Xiao Chun, don't be happy too early. Within the holy mausoleum, Su Tianzi, will have plenty of opportunities to kill you. Looking at Xiao Chun, Su Tianzi viciously thought. In this way, they faced each other for nearly an hour before the surrounding heat waves gradually dissipated. At the same time, the terrifying flames also slowly extinguished. However, as the magma gradually extinguished, the originally pitch-black ground seemed to be covered with a layer of rotten soil. It looked black and disgusting. The surrounding temperature quickly returned to normal. However, before the crowd could breathe a sigh of relief, a huge pressure suddenly descended from the sky. Under the pressure of this powerful pressure, the crowd couldn't fly at all. In an instant, they fell heavily to the ground. Forbidden Space Talisman Array. Feeling the pressure, Xiao Chun and Su Tianzi spoke almost at the same time. This pressure was definitely caused by the Forbidden Space Talisman Array. It must be said that the Forbidden Space Talisman Array had reached the saint level. Although it didn't have any offensive power, as long as a cultivator was within the array's range, they would be prohibited from flying. This was because the terrifying pressure was impossible to resist at all. They didn't expect that there would be a Forbidden Space Talisman Array in the Holy Mausoleum. And from the looks of it, the Forbidden Space Talisman Array covered the entire Holy Mausoleum. Without the slightest ability to resist, the crowd fell from the sky one after another. Fortunately, the magma below them had already cooled down. Standing on the ground again, Xiao Chun looked pensive. If there is a Forbidden Space Talisman Array, it means that if we want to obtain the opportunity in the Holy Mausoleum, I'm afraid we can only rely on foot to reach the central volcano. Xiao Chun looked at the volcano at the end of the Holy Mausoleum. In fact, from the very beginning, Xiao Chun had already guessed that the inheritance and opportunities in the Holy Mausoleum should be in that volcano. Now, it seemed that his guess was correct. Originally, without the Forbidden Space Talisman Array, the group would have been able to reach the Black Volcano in a short period of time. But now, with the Forbidden Space Talisman Array, the crowd's ability to fly had been deprived, so they could only rely on walking. This would take an unknown amount of time. In addition, Xiao Chun was certain that there would be other tests waiting for them on the way to the volcano. Xiao Chun secretly pondered. Su Tianzi obviously also thought of the same thing, and turned his head to look coldly at Xiao Chun. Su Tianzi coldly snorted. Xiao Chun, if you have the guts, come to the volcano. That will be your burial ground. Su Tianzi had already thought it through. He didn't want to fight to the death with Xiao Chun before he finally obtained the inheritance. In Su Tianzi's view, if Xiao Chun didn't reach the Black Volcano, then the opportunity and inheritance in the Holy Mausoleum would naturally all belong to him, Su Tianzi. But if Xiao Chun did reach there, Su Tianzi would definitely kill Xiao Chun even if he had to pay a price. At that time, the inheritance and opportunity would still belong to him, Su Tianzi. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 650. Su Tianzi wanted to use all his strength to kill Xiao Chun at the last moment. Moreover, he was not afraid that Xiao Chun would not dare to come, because that would be even better. Su Tianzi would still be able to monopolize the opportunities and inheritances in the sacred tomb. As soon as he finished speaking, without waiting for Xiao Chun's reply, Su Tianzi immediately led everyone away, advancing towards the Black Volcano along the way. After watching Su Tianzi's group leave, Nangong Yin frowned slightly and said, Su Tianzi's move is really insidious. In this way, no matter what, senior brother Xiao Chun will have to fight Su Tianzi in the end, unless senior brother gives up on the opportunities and inheritances in the sacred tomb. Nangong Yin directly exposed Su Tianzi's thoughts. It could be said that Xiao Chun was now in a dilemma, but in this regard, Xiao Chun smiled slightly and said, let's take things one step at a time. Let's take it one step at a time. Maybe the Black Volcano isn't the only place with opportunities. Perhaps there are also opportunities in other places. Moreover, we are here to get a share of the pie, so we don't have to care too much about the final result. Xiao Chen's expression did not change too much. In Xiao Chen's opinion, opportunities were things that one would be lucky to obtain and fate to lose. If they were really not fated to obtain it, then there was no need to be too conflicted. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, Nangong Yin did not say anything more. In her opinion, the opportunities in the sacred tomb were most likely not fated with Xiao Chen. After the previous battle, anyone could see that Xiao Chen was actually not Su Tian's opponent. If it really came down to snatching the opportunities in the end, Su Tianzi, who had no worries, could definitely kill Xiao Chen. As he said, he had the ability to kill Xiao Chen if he paid a price. Therefore, if Xiao Chen insisted on going to the Black Volcano to confront Su Tianzi, the result might not be good. Xiao Chen naturally knew what the Nangong Yin was thinking, and Xiao Chen's idea was very simple. First, they would walk around the Holy Tomb and see if there were any gains. If the opportunity and inheritance were really at the Black Volcano, then they could just give up. Now is not the time to talk about how the path of cultivation was like sailing against the current, or how one had to fight for opportunities. He knew that he was no match for Su Tianzi, but he still forced himself to fight. That would be stupid. How could Xiao Chen do such a stupid thing? He knew that there was a tiger in the mountain, but he still went to the mountain. In Xiao Chen's opinion, this was not bravery, but a problem with his IQ. Without saying anything more, Xiao Chen glanced at everyone and said with a smile, "Let's go. It's rare for us to come to this legendary holy tomb, so we should at least take a look around." Xiao Chen's expression was very relaxed. As soon as his voice fell, everyone chose a different direction and walked towards the Black Volcano at the same time. Along the way, as Xiao Chen had guessed, the anti-flight charm matrix completely covered every corner of the Holy Mausoleum. Therefore, it was impossible for Xiao Chen and the others to fly in the air in the Holy Mausoleum. Along the way, the Holy Tomb gave off a lifeless feeling, and there was not the slightest bit of life. But apart from feeling a little cold, there was nothing else. After walking for more than an hour, no one had encountered any danger. Rumor has it that the Holy Tomb has a test set by the Holy Tomb. Why is this Holy Tomb so quiet? Nangong Yin asked suspiciously along the way. The sacred mausoleum was the mausoleum of a saint, and was the place where a saint left his inheritance. Therefore, when choosing a successor, he would naturally have to go through a selection process. However, the sacred mausoleum was strange. Apart from the huge change from before and the space restriction glyph array, there were no other changes. Nangong Yin could not understand this. As soon as Nangong Yin finished his sentence, the ground beneath everyone's feet suddenly shook. At the same time, Xiao Chen, who walked in front of everyone, chuckled softly without turning back. "Miss Nangong, your mouth is really... You want to say that I have a crow's mouth, right?" Xiao Chen didn't say it out directly, but Nangong Yin didn't shy away from it. Indeed, as soon as Nangong Yin finished speaking, something strange happened. In front of everyone, from the ground, white bones slowly drilled out. These white bones didn't have flesh and blood, only skeletons. However, they were all equipped with Earth's spiritual weapons and Heaven's spiritual weapons. Hundreds of white bones quickly crawled out from the ground and firmly blocked Xiao Chen's path. Seeing this group of white bones, everyone didn't think much of it at first, but soon, Nangong Yin seemed to have thought of something. His expression changed abruptly, and he exclaimed, "These are bone soldiers." Nangong Yin seemed to be unsure of her own judgment, so she did not have much confidence in her words. However, hearing this, Xiao Chen asked curiously, "Miss Nangong, do you know what these bones are?" Xiao Chen had secretly observed these white bones and was sure that they had no breath of life. But now, they could move freely, which made Xiao Chen feel a little strange. What was certain was that these white bones were all human, but the fact that dead humans could move freely as bones was somewhat puzzling. Looking at the Nangong Yin in doubt, Xiao Chen looked at Nangong Yin and said with uncertainty, "I once saw an introduction to bone soldiers in an ancient book. It is said that this bone soldier is similar to the method of refining puppets, but it is much more inferior than the method of refining puppets. However, the cruel method is despised by many powerhouses in the Sky River continent. So a long time ago, under the joint decision of many saints, the method of refining bone soldiers was listed as evil, and no one was allowed to practice it. According to the records, in order to refine this bone soldier, it must be refined by a living person. The flesh and blood of the person must be refined, and then the soul must be scattered and imprisoned in the skeleton. In this way, although the bone soldiers are dead, they can maintain the ability to move. At the same time, they can be 100% loyal. Nangong Yan's understanding of bone soldiers was also for books. In general, the two methods of bone soldiers should be regarded as a branch of the puppet technique, but compared to the puppet technique, they were much weaker. Hearing Nangong Yan's account, a chill flashed in Xiao Chen's eyes. To actually refine a person's flesh and blood, such a cruel method, it was no wonder that the saints of the Tenna continent would list the refining method of this bone weapon as a forbidden technique and forbid anyone from practicing it. Doesn't the thousands of bone soldiers in front of him mean that thousands of living people were forcibly refined? Looking at the bone soldiers in front of him, Xiao Chun said slowly, "If these bone soldiers were given to us by the master of the sacred mausoleum as a trial, then it seems that the master of the sacred mausoleum is not a good person. Perhaps he was a great devil when he was alive? Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation." This chapter ends. Chapter 651. Xiao Chun hated this cruel method of refining bone soldiers. Xiao Chun admitted that he was not a good person, but Xiao Chun would never learn such evil techniques. According to Nangong Yan's introduction, once this bone soldier was successfully refined, not only could it retain its strength, but it would also not feel pain, and there was no need to worry that it would betray you. It would only obey the orders of its master. It could definitely be regarded as a very powerful method. The most important thing was that this method of refining bone soldiers was not difficult to cultivate, and it did not have any requirements for talent. Therefore, this method of refining bone soldiers was still popular in the Tenna continent for a while. It was true that the method of refining bone soldiers was powerful, but so what? Xiao Chun was not interested in cultivating such an unorthodox method. Looking calmly at the thousands of bone soldiers in front of him, Xiao Chun found that the strength of these more than 1,000 bone soldiers was generally at the level of the Tao Confirmation realm and the Tao Seeking realm. Like this time, they were naturally not afraid. Sighing softly, Xiao Chun said indifferently, "You were refined into bone weapons when you were alive, and you have been living like walking corpses until now. I'm sure you don't want to be like this. Since we have met, I will free all of you today and no longer be imprisoned by others." Regardless of whether these bone soldiers still had consciousness or whether they could understand his words, in Xiao Chen's view, these bone soldiers were equivalent to being forcibly imprisoned. Even if they died, they could not ascend to heaven and could only be used as tools endlessly. They had suffered great pain when they were alive, and they still could not rest in peace after death. In this regard, Xiao Chun did have some sympathy for these bone soldiers. As soon as his voice fell, the storage ring in Xiao Chen's hand flashed, and the ink dragon sword immediately appeared in his hand. Holding the ink dragon sword, Xiao Chun did not hesitate at all. He took a step forward and rushed directly towards the thousands of bone soldiers in front of him. These bone soldiers were obviously a test left by the master of the holy mausoleum. He chose to fight with these bone soldiers, but there was no fighting spirit in Xiao Chen's eyes. In Xiao Chen's view, he did not want to fight with these bone soldiers, but to help them escape and give them relief. He took the lead and rushed into the encirclement of the bone soldiers. Following Xiao Chen's action, these bone soldiers also reacted and surrounded Xiao Chen. Just as Xiao Chen chose to attack, Nangong Yan and the others naturally would not stand by and watch. They followed closely behind Xiao Chen and also attacked these bone soldiers. The ink dragon, sword in his hand, constantly swung. Just as Nangong Yan said, these bone soldiers did not know pain at all. If you did not give them a fatal blow, they would not fall at all. If you cut off their arms or legs, these bone warriors wouldn't even stop. They would continue to attack you. Only by cutting off their heads with a sword could you truly kill them. They are indeed war machines. They can retain their previous combat strength and, at the same time, are not afraid of death and have no pain or fear. Moreover, the threshold of cultivation is so low. No wonder the method of refining bone soldiers was so popular at that time. Xiao Qin whispered softly as he fought. These bone soldiers were born for war. Think about it. If a country like the Moonless Empire had a bone soldier legion, it did not need many. Only 100,000 people would be enough. Perhaps Danyang County would have been unified long ago. Feeling pity for these bone soldiers, Xiao Chun did not hesitate at all, because in Xiao Qin's view, killing them was really helping them and freeing them. Under the leadership of Xiao Chun, everyone fought fiercely with these more than 1,000 bone soldiers. After more than 2 hours, everyone killed all of these bone soldiers. All of their heads were cut off, and the ground was covered with bones. Then Xiao Chun asked 2 disciples of Tianfeng, Shengzong, to dig a deep pit on the ground and bury all these bones. Although he did not know the identity of these bone soldiers when they were alive, and did not know how long they had been here, Xiao Qin's action could be considered as letting them rest in peace. Perhaps he could not give them anything else, but at least Xiao Chun could let them have a quiet place after death, and not be used as a tool of war. He led everyone to bow to the place where these bone soldiers were buried, and it was also at this time that a faint light appeared at the place where the bone soldiers had appeared. Then, a piece of jade slowly floated up from the ground. Seeing the appearance of this jade, everyone's face was filled with joy, but only Xiao Qin's eyes flashed with a chill. More than 1,000 bone soldiers had been killed by the group, which was considered to be passing the first test of the master of the Holy Mausoleum. Thus, the technique relaying jade might be one of the opportunities in the Holy Mausoleum. However, combined with the previous situation, Xiao Chun had vaguely guessed what the technique in the technique relaying jade was. It was the method of refining bone soldiers. As soon as they arrived, they obtained the opportunity in the sacred tomb, but everyone did not act rashly. Instead, they all looked at Xiao Chun. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Xiao Chun slowly walked up to the technique relaying jade and reached out to grab it. Just when everyone thought that Xiao Chun was ready to accept the opportunity, to their surprise, Xiao Chun did not hesitate at all. He clenched his fist and immediately destroyed the technique relaying jade. It was completely crushed into powder. Seeing Xiao Chun destroy the jade, everyone, including Nangong Yin, was stunned. Nangong Yin asked with a puzzled expression, "Senior brother Xiao Chun, what are you doing? This jade must contain the opportunity of this sacred tomb. Why did you destroy it? Why would I, Xiao Chun, practice such a cruel cultivation method? You don't need to practice it either. Although the path of martial arts is full of thorns, no matter what the situation is, I always feel that since we are born as humans, we must have our own bottom line." In the face of Nangong Yan's questioning, Xiao Chun said indifferently, without the slightest regret for destroying this jade. After hearing Xiao Qin's words, how could Nangong Yin not guess that what was recorded in the jade just now was the method of refining bone soldiers? And Xiao Chun obviously also guessed this point, so without the slightest hesitation, he directly destroyed the jade. In Xiao Qin's heart, on the path of martial arts, there is nothing wrong with fighting against the heavens, but one must never do something heartless. In order to improve one's strength, one must practice a vicious cultivation method like the method of refining bone soldiers. This was something that Xiao Qin despised. Every expert's path of growth was accompanied by mountains of corpses and seas of blood, and Xiao Qin was no exception. Along the way, Xiao Qin had killed many people, but Xiao Qin would never indiscriminately kill the innocent. This was the bottom line, and also the pride in Xiao Qin's heart. He looked down on a vicious cultivation method like the method of refining bone soldiers. So no matter how strong it was, Xiao Qin would not practice it. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 652. He destroyed the jade stone without hesitation. Hearing Xiao Qin's words, Nangong Yan's beautiful eyes flashed with a touch of surprise. Obviously, She did not expect that someone would choose to give up the jade stone that was suspected to be the method of refining bone soldiers without hesitation. Moreover, from Xiao Chen's expression and words, Nangong Yin could be sure that Xiao Chun really did not want to cut it, or rather, he looked down on the method of refining bone soldiers. The strength of the method of refining bone soldiers was naturally undeniable, but Xiao Chun did not take any action. After being stunned for a moment, Nangong Yin smiled slightly and whispered softly, "What a strange person. Brother Xiao Chun is like this. He seems to be approachable, but he is prouder than anyone else in his heart. If he doesn't like something, even if it is the best treasure in the world, he will not take a second look at it." Although Nangong Yan's voice was small, Gu Lingyao on the side heard it and smiled slightly. Gu Lingyao's understanding of Xiao Chan was obviously not comparable to Nangong Yan, so in the face of Xiao Chen's behavior, Gu Lingyao was not surprised at all. Hearing Gu Lingyao's words, Nangong Yin did not say anything more, but she had a different view of Xiao Chun in her heart. At least Nangong Yin had never seen such a proud person. Pride was not necessarily arrogance. For example, Xiao Chun. Usually, Xiao Chun gave people the feeling that he was approachable, but people who were familiar with Xiao Chun knew that the pride in Xiao Chun's heart was absolutely not inferior to anyone, even more. Without noticing Nangong Yan's change and destroying the jade stone, Xiao Chun did not explain anything to the crowd. Although he guessed that everyone present must have the idea of refining bone soldiers, Xiao Chun did not allow it. "Let's go." After saying lightly to everyone, Xiao Chun took the lead and walked towards the black volcano. After the battle, just now, to be honest, Xiao Chun did not have a good impression of the owner of the Holy Mausoleum. A person who could practice the method of refining bone soldiers, even if he was a saint, was not worthy of his respect, not to mention that this person had probably refined a lot of bone soldiers before he died. Xiao Chun led everyone on the road. Along the way, they encountered bone soldiers 5 times in a row. Of course, in the end, they were all defeated by the crowd. With every bone soldier's obstruction, there would be a reward after the battle. In addition to the jade stone for the first time, the following rewards were almost all spirit weapons, elixirs, heaven and earth treasures, and so on. Xiao Chun naturally did not destroy these things, but he also did not want them. Perhaps in order to appease the crowd, Xiao Chun gave these things to Nangong Yin and the others. They were not very good things. The best of the 5 rewards was a heaven-level spirit weapon, but it was only a heaven-level mid-grade spear. Xiao Chun had no use for it, and the ink dragon sword was much better than this spear, so Xiao Chun did not hesitate to give it to a disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong. There was no sunrise or sunset in the Holy Mausoleum, so after an unknown amount of time, the group finally arrived at the foot of the black volcano. Looking at the black volcano up close, everyone realized that the volcano was simply boundless, and the mountain was covered with black rocks, looking eerie and terrifying. When they arrived at the foot of the black volcano, Xiao Chun and the others were naturally ready to climb the mountain, but before they could move, the ground shook again, but this time there were no bone soldiers. Instead, a huge arena rose from the ground, and everyone stood directly on the arena. The arena was huge, and it could easily accommodate hundreds of people. Therefore, Xiao Chun and the others did not feel crowded, even though there were only a dozen of them standing on it. The sudden appearance of the arena stunned Xiao Chun and the others, but they quickly reacted. This was probably one of the tests, but they did not know what the test was about. They stood calmly on the arena, and soon, a middle-aged man in a black robe with a pale and vicious face appeared in the air above the arena. However, the man's figure was very ethereal, and it was formed by a wisp of soul. With the appearance of the middle-aged man, Nangong Yin whispered to Xiao Chun, "This is a wisp of Saint soul. It seems that this middle-aged man is the owner of the Holy Mausoleum." Hearing Nangong Yan's words, Xiao Chun also looked at the middle-aged man in the sky, but he did not feel the slightest anger. However, facing the gazes of Xiao Chun and the others, the middle-aged man said expressionlessly, "My name is Baigu Saint. Since you have entered my holy mausoleum, you all have the hope of obtaining my inheritance. However, my inheritance can only be passed to one person. This is the last test, and only one person can pass it. Once you pass this test, you will be able to find my inheritance, the middle-aged man said slowly. Hearing this, Nangong Yan's face became extremely ugly. To be precise, after learning the middle-aged man's name, Nangong Yan's face became extremely ugly. Noticing the change in Nangong Yan's expression, Xiao Chen asked, "Why, do you know this Baigu saint?" "I've read about him in ancient books," Nangong Yan said with an ugly face in the face of Xiao Chen's inquiry. According to Nangong Yan, the Baigu saint was a figure from thousands of years ago. No one knew the origin of the Baigu saint. They only knew that when he appeared, he set off a reign of terror in the Tiana continent with the method of refining bone weapons. According to the records, the Baigu saint's methods were ruthless. Massacring cities and destroying countries was as simple as eating and drinking for him. Under the Baigu saint's ruthless methods, the Tiana continent at that time could be said to be a bloodbath. Except for those holy sects with saints, many other countries and sects, large and small, were slaughtered by the Baigu saint. In the end, several saints of the Tiana continent finally couldn't bear the tyranny of the Baigu saint and wanted to join forces to kill him. Unfortunately, the Baigu saint was quite cunning and escaped in the end. But strangely, after the Baigu saint escaped, he never appeared again. In the end, the world slowly forgot about this matter. Nangong Yin then told Xiao Chun everything she had read about the white-boned saint in the ancient books. She then added in a puzzled tone, "However, the white-boned saint shouldn't have died in the battle back then. Didn't another saint make a move and kill him?" This was the holy tomb of the Baigu saint. In this way, the Baigu saint was obviously dead. According to Nangong Yin, the Baigu saint finally escaped in the battle thousands of years ago. In this way, could it be that another saint killed the Baigu saint after that? Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 653. This place was actually the holy tomb of the white-boned saint. This was indeed unexpected for no other reason than the fact that the white-boned saint was simply too notorious. Nangong Yin was puzzled, but Xiao Chun had completely lost interest in this holy tomb. He looked calmly at the white-boned saint in the sky. At the same time, the white-boned saint continued to speak. The requirements for this last test are very simple. Only one of you can survive, and the one who survives will be able to obtain my inheritance. All right, you may begin. As the white-boned saint's voice fell, the expressions of Nangong Yin and the others changed drastically. At the same time, everyone involuntarily looked at Xiao Chun. No one had expected that the white-boned saint would actually leave behind such a test. It was simply to make everyone kill each other. Only 1 out of 10 people could pass. In this way, if they were greedy, then they would definitely kill each other. After all, the victor would obtain the inheritance of a saint. So how many people in the world would be able to resist such temptation? The more than 10 disciples of Tian Feng Xingzong were somewhat tempted, but at the same time, they were also somewhat afraid. On the one hand, they really wanted the inheritance of the white-boned saint. Even though the white-boned saint was a saint who was spurned by others, his strength was unquestionable. The fact that he was able to escape from the encirclement of several saints was enough to explain everything. Imagine, if they could obtain the inheritance of the white-boned saint, then wouldn't they, as ordinary disciples, be able to successfully become core disciples in a short period of time? Moreover, they might even be able to become personal disciples in the end. Greed gradually grew in their hearts, but they didn't lose their minds. Reason told them that now was not the time to think about this, because there was still Xiao Chun. With Xiao Chun's strength, it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill all of them present. Even if Gu Ling Yao and Nangong Yin joined forces, they probably wouldn't be able to stop Xiao Chun. At the same time as greed arose, fear arose in their hearts. Noticing the changes in the more than 10 disciples of Tian Feng Xingzong, Xiao Chun could naturally guess what they were thinking. However, at this time, Xiao Chun had no interest in the inheritance of the white-boned saint. Xiao Chun didn't care about such an inheritance. Turning his head to look at the crowd, Xiao Chun said calmly, "We don't want this inheritance anymore." What's the use of having the inheritance of such an inhumane person? Let's go. Seeing that many people were greedy, Xiao Qian was ready to lead the crowd away and directly give up the opportunity in the holy mausoleum. Hearing this, the expressions of several disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong changed slightly, and a trace of unwillingness flashed in their eyes. Some of them even directly spoke to Xiao Qian. Senior Xiao Qian, if we leave, then won't the opportunity here be given to Su Tianzi for nothing? Although he didn't say it explicitly, the meaning of this disciple was already very clear. He didn't want to give up the inheritance of the white-boned saint. Hearing this, Xiao Qian's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. He looked directly at this disciple and said, "What? Do you want to kill us and then take the inheritance of the white-boned saint? For the sake of an inheritance, you can disregard the friendship between your fellow disciples and do something like killing your fellow disciples?" Senior Xiao Qian, I didn't mean that, but this is the inheritance of the white-boned saint after all. If we can obtain it. Facing Xiao Qian's questioning, this disciple was clearly a little flustered and stammered, but in the end, he still expressed his reluctance to give up the inheritance of the white-boned saint. Hearing this disciple's words, Xiao Qian turned his head to look at the others. Obviously, the inheritance of the white-boned saint was simply too tempting for them to describe. Just as everyone's opinions were divided, the white-boned saint in the sky sneered and said in a hoarse voice, "Friendship between fellow disciples? This is the funniest joke I've ever heard. Little kid, I see that you have good talent, but who would have thought that you were so pedantic? In this world, friendship is the most worthless thing. Only one's own strength is king. Let me show you the way. This little kid doesn't know what's good for him, and his strength is the strongest among you. Why don't you join forces to take him down and then determine the final winner?" Xiao Qian clearly expressed his unwillingness to weaken the white-boned saint, and the white-boned saint also spoke at this time to tempt everyone. As the white-boned saint's voice fell, the eyes of the greedy Tianfeng Shengzong disciples gradually changed at this time. Obviously, the words of the white-boned saint had completely ignited the greed in their hearts. Who didn't want to become a powerhouse in the limelight? Who didn't want to be the ruler of the world and leave a legacy for generations? In the face of the inheritance left by a saint, these disciples obviously couldn't control the greed in their hearts. Their eyes were locked on Xiao Qian. Seeing this, a touch of disappointment flashed in Xiao Qian's eyes, and he said, "In life, there are things to do and things not to do. I can understand that you want to become stronger, but if you use this method to obtain strength, I can't communicate with you, and I can't sit back and do nothing." Xiao Qian saw through the thoughts of these disciples and tried to persuade them for the last time. However, it was obvious that Xiao Qian's words didn't change their minds. A touch of killing intent gradually appeared in their eyes. In the face of the saint's inheritance, these disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong had completely gone crazy. No one knew who shouted, but then 5 disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong immediately rushed toward Xiao Qian. Everyone attacked together. "Let's kill Xiao Qian first, then we'll decide who the saint's inheritance belongs to." Following this angry roar, the 5 disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong immediately rushed toward Xiao Qian. In response, Xiao Qian only sighed softly and said, "The greed in your hearts has not only made you lose your conscience, but also your ability to judge." Xiao Qian didn't care about the 5 ordinary disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong at all. Just as Xiao Qian said, driven by greed, these 5 people had lost even the most basic ability to judge. If they dared to attack him with just the 5 of them, what else could it be other than losing their minds? Sighing softly, Xiao Qian's storage ring flashed, and the ink dragon sword instantly appeared in his hand. With a slash of the sword, he directly used the square heaven sword shadow. Since these 5 people attacked him because of greed, Xiao Qian naturally wouldn't show mercy. With a slash of the sword, sword shadows filled the sky. Faced with the hardness of the sky, these 5 people had no way of dodging at all. In just an instant, the 5 of them were beheaded, and their bodies were directly torn to pieces by the countless sword edges. Please vote. please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 654. Xiaoqian didn't show any mercy. He didn't even give the 5 disciples a chance to beg for mercy. He killed them all with a single sword strike. Seeing that Xiaoqian killed the 5 disciples directly, the remaining Tianfeng Shengzong disciples' faces changed drastically. They were afraid that Xiaoqian would attack them. However, Xiaoqian spoke first. I've already said that there are things a man should do and things he shouldn't do. If you use this method to obtain power, I, Xiaoqian, would rather not. You should also put away the greed in your hearts. Xiaoqian did not make a move against those disciples. Although they wanted the lineage of the white-boned saint very much, they held themselves back. As such, Xiaoqian only gave them a warning before sheathing his sword. Seeing that Xiaoqian chose to kill so decisively, Nangongyan's beautiful eyes were even more surprised. Just when Xiaoqian killed the 5 disciples of the Tianfeng saint, on the other side of the Black Volcano, where Su Tianzi and more than a dozen disciples of the Tianyue sacred sect were. At this time, they also encountered the same situation as Xiaoqian and others. A wisp of the divine soul of the white bone saint was also floating in the air. However, in the face of the same situation, Su Tianzi's choice was different from Xiaoqian's. Among the disciples of the Tianyue sacred sect, only the 2 core disciples were still alive at this time. As for the others, they had already become corpses. The 2 core disciples continuously retreated, while Su Tianzi's expression was calm as he closed in on them step by step. As they retreated, the 2 of them opened their mouths to beg for mercy. Senior brother Su, we never thought of snatching the inheritance from you. Please let us go, let us go. Just now, after the white-boned saint stated the conditions of this test, Su Tianzi almost killed the disciples of the Tianyue sacred sect without hesitation. Caught off guard, he killed more than a dozen disciples of the Tianyue sacred sect who followed him all the way. Only the 2 core disciples who were slightly stronger escaped. However, this was obviously only temporary. Su Tianzi was constantly approaching them. In the face of the 2 begging for mercy, Su Tianzi said calmly, "Let you go? Do you think I will believe your words? If I didn't make the first move, I'm afraid I would have been besieged by you. In the face of the saint's inheritance, you didn't think of killing me?" Su Tianzi's words were so confident, as if it was a matter of course. He was the one who killed for the saint's inheritance, but from his mouth, it seemed like he was the victim. Regardless of whether Su Tianzi's words were true or false, even if he really thought so, it could only be said that Su Tianzi was using himself to measure others. As the saying goes, the world is the same as the way you look at it. For example, if you were a fickle villain, then in your eyes, everyone else in this world was also fickle villains. Su Tianzi was such a person. In the face of the saint's inheritance, the friendship of fellow disciples was nothing in his eyes. In this way, in his eyes, others would obviously attack him for the saint's inheritance. As soon as his voice fell, Su Tianzi did not give the 2 any more chances. He leaped forward and quickly killed the 2. The more than a dozen disciples of the Tianyue sacred sect, who followed Su Tianzi into the sacred mausoleum, probably did not expect that they would die in the hands of Su Tianzi. Just when Su Tianzi had successfully killed the other disciples of the Tianyue sacred sect, Xiaoqian, after killing the 5 disciples, turned to look at the white-boned saint in the sky and said indifferently, "I, Xiaoqian, am not worthy of your inheritance. You'd better find someone else." As soon as he finished speaking, Xiaoqian turned around and prepared to leave with everyone. However, the white-boned saint was one step ahead and laughed coldly. "Ha, what a good not worthy. However, do you think that my inheritance is something that you can take as you wish? Since you're willing to do as I say, then all of you can die here." Xiaoqian's words had obviously angered the white-boned saint. As soon as he finished speaking, a dense black qi spread out from his body. From the black qi, a bloody and cold aura was constantly emitted. Although it was only a wisp of a saint's soul, the strength of the white-boned saint's soul could not be underestimated. Xiaoqian's disregard for his inheritance had aroused the killing intent in the white-boned saint's heart. Feeling the intense killing intent from the white-boned saint, Xiao Chen also turned around and stood with his sword in hand. After being intertwined, this wisp of the white-boned saint's soul should only be equivalent to a cultivator of the Wei transformation realm in battle. Compared to a saint, it was thousands of miles away, but it still gave Xiao Chen a lot of pressure. I will give you another chance. Do as I say. Not only can you obtain my inheritance, but you can also live. How about it? Looking at Xiao Chen, who was standing with his sword in hand, a hint of admiration flashed in the white-boned saint's eyes. Xiao Chen looked down on him, but on the other side, Su Tianze was very cooperative. However, between Xiao Chen and Su Tianze, the white-boned saint obviously favored Xiao Chen. He felt that Xiao Chen was the most suitable person for his inheritance. On the other side, even though Su Tianze had already killed the people of Tianyue's sacred sect, the white-boned saint still did not give him his inheritance. His purpose was to wait for Xiao Chen. However, facing the white-boned saint's final threat, Xiao Chen said almost without hesitation, I said, I am not worthy of your inheritance. He chose to refuse without hesitation. At the same time, while saying this, Xiao Chen was secretly thinking of a way to deal with it. At this time, facing a wisp of a saint's soul, it was still difficult to resist. Even so, Xiao Chen could not compromise because there was no way to compromise. Could it be that he had to kill Gu Lingyao with his own hands? That was absolutely impossible. Seeing that Xiao Chen refused without hesitation again, the killing intent in the white-boned saint's eyes became extremely intense. Then, he said coldly, in that case you will die. After saying that, the black chi on the white-boned saint's body suddenly surged. At the same time, he slapped at Xiao Chen. Before the attack arrived, Xiao Chen already felt a great pressure. Even though it was only a wisp of a saint's soul, Xiao Chen was still unable to deal with it. Seeing that the white-boned saint did not hesitate to kill Xiao Chen, Nangong Yin and Gu Lingyao also did not hesitate to come to Xiao Chen's side. They were ready to help Xiao Chen resist the attack of the white-boned saint. Humph! An ant wants to compete with the bright moon. You're courting death. Today, I will fulfill your wish. Seeing Gu Lingyao and Nangong Yan's actions, the white-boned saint shouted coldly. Just as the white-boned saint's voice fell, something strange happened again. From the other side of the holy tomb, a golden light soared into the sky. At the same time, an indifferent voice came from the sky. Why can't an ant compete with the bright moon? As long as you don't admit defeat, an ant will become the bright moon one day. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 655. The golden light soared into the sky without any warning. Accompanied by this indifferent but seemingly magical voice, the white-boned saint's hand movements paused. Immediately after, he looked at the golden light in the distance with an incomparably ferocious expression and gritted his teeth as he shouted angrily. Xiao Sheng, are you really going to be so resolute that you won't even let me leave my inheritance behind? Xiao Sheng. Upon hearing the Bone Saint's words, Xiao Chen's expression changed slightly and a strange glint flashed in his eyes. Then, in the blink of an eye, a handsome young man in a white robe appeared in front of the Bone Saint out of thin air. The young man's figure was slender, but he stood upright. His black hair fluttered in the wind. He placed his hands behind his back and said with a straight face, I've already said that your inheritance shouldn't appear in this world. Back then, I gave you time to build the holy mausoleum so that you would have a place to settle down after your death. As a saint, I don't want to see your corpse exposed in the wilderness after your death. However, this doesn't mean that you can leave your inheritance behind. Looking at the young man standing opposite the Bone Saint in the sky, Xiao Chen was stunned. He couldn't be more familiar with this figure. It's really Xiao Sheng. It's really him, that's right. This young man in white was Xiao Chen's ancestor, Xiao Sheng. However, he was just a wisp of holy soul like the Bone Saint. Judging from his aura, Xiao Chen should only be in the saint realm when he left behind this wisp of holy soul. He had yet to break through to the quasi-saint realm. This was normal. Xiao Shang came to the Tiana mainland by chance and broke through to the saint realm there. However, Xiao Shang only broke through to the quasi-saint realm after returning to the Tianqian mainland. Therefore, when he was in the Tiana mainland, Xiao Shang was only in the saint realm at that time. Xiao Chun didn't expect to see Xiao Shang here. If he asked himself honestly, there was only one person that Xiao Chen worshipped, and that was Xiao Shang. Xiao Shang was Xiao Chen's ancestor, and, at the same time, Xiao Chen admired what he had done. In Xiao Chen's words, that was how a man should be. That was Xiao Chen's evaluation of Xiao Shang. Sensing Xiao Chen's abnormality, Gu Lingyao asked with concern, "Brother Xiao Chun, are you all right?" However, Xiao Chun ignored Gu Lingyao's question. His eyes were fixed on Xiao Shang. At this time, Xiao Shang was less calm and indifferent than when he was in the Tianqian mainland, but more domineering. He was like a sword. At the end of his life, Xiao Shang's cultivation had reached the quasi-saint realm, but his sharpness was more restrained. Xiao Shang in the Tiana mainland, although his cultivation was only in the saint realm, he was more like an unsheathed sharp jian, showing off his sharpness. It was no exaggeration to say that Xiao Shang was the person that the white-boned saint didn't want to meet the most. Back then, he had escaped the encirclement of several saints, but in the end, he had died at the hands of Xiao Shang. With his own strength, Xiao Shang had killed the white-boned saint. No matter how the white-boned saint used all kinds of methods, they were all useless against Xiao Shang. It was as if he was a natural nemesis. In front of Xiao Shang, the white-boned saint was so powerless. Gritting his teeth, the white-boned saint enunciated each word clearly. "Xiao Shang, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have died in such a desolate place. You gave me time to build the holy mausoleum, but you had already made your own arrangements. After I died, you deliberately left behind this wisp of saint soul. It was all for today, wasn't it?" Back then, the white-boned saint had escaped the encirclement of several saints, but before he could celebrate, Xiao Shang had blocked his way. Naturally, the two of them had a great battle. However, the result was something that the white-boned saint hadn't expected. They were both saints, but in front of Xiao Shang, the white-boned saint couldn't resist at all. After a great battle, the white-boned saint fled, but Xiao Shang chased after him. The two of them chased and fled all the way to the Fengyue Mountains. In the end, the white-boned saint was severely injured by Xiao Shang in the Fengyue Mountains. When he was dying, Xiao Shang gave the white-boned saint time to build the holy mausoleum. According to Xiao Shang, even though the white-boned saint had done many evil things, he was still a saint. After his death, Xiao Shang didn't want his corpse to be exposed in the wilderness. There was no way for him to live. His injuries were too serious, and his vitality was constantly fading. At the last moment of his life, the white-boned saint had indeed built the holy mausoleum. However, he also took the opportunity to leave his inheritance behind. He thought that everything would be fine, but Xiao Shang was obviously prepared. He also left a wisp of his divine soul in the holy mausoleum. Ignoring the white-boned saint's roar, Xiao Shang said indifferently, "Say no more. Your inheritance is too evil. It can't be left behind. Do it." Knowing that the white-boned saint wouldn't give up without a fight, Xiao Shang said directly. Hearing this, the white-boned saint was filled with hatred. He shouted angrily, "Xiao Shang, you've gone too far." Saying that, the white-boned saint charged at Xiao Shang. The two saints' divine souls immediately clashed. The battle in the sky broke out. On the stage, Xiao Chen's eyes were still fixed on Xiao Shang. At the same time, Nangong Yin, who had been silently muttering something, suddenly remembered something. Nangong Yin looked at Xiao Shang in the sky and said excitedly, Xiao Shang, I remember now. I remember now." Nangong Yin couldn't help but scream. Looking at the excited Nangong Yin, Xiao Chun came back to his senses and turned to look at the excited Nangong Yin. Seeing this, Nangong Yin took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. He said to Xiao Chun with a longing look, "I remember who this Xiao Shang is. He's the Tai saint. The Tai Saint was Xiao Shang's title on the Tiana continent. These 4 words were absolutely famous on the Tiana continent. Even now, he was known as the #1 victor on the Tiana continent. The Tai Saint, Xiao Shang, is not only known as the #1 saint on the Tiana continent, but also the strongest person below the quasi-saints. In the absence of quasi-saints on the Tiana continent, the Tai Saint, Xiao Shang, is a person who looks down on all heroes. He and the White Bones Saint have mysterious origins. It's as if they appeared out of thin air. However, compared to the White Bones Saint, the Tai Saint, Xiao Shang, is a legend. He single-handedly defeated all the sage sects on the Tiana continent and defeated all the saints on the Tiana continent. Back then, the Tai Saint could be said to be the nightmare of all the saints on the Tiana continent. At the same time, he was the dream lover of all the women on the Tiana continent. It is said that in the Tai Saint's era, all the geniuses of his generation were suppressed by him, and all the peerless beauties of the sage sects fell in love with him. Finally remembering who Xiao Chun was, Nangong Yin said with a longing look, as if he hated that he wasn't born in the same era as Xiao Shang. He didn't have the chance to personally witness the magnificent scene of Xiao Shang dominating the world, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 656. Nangong Yin said with a look of longing. It could be said that Xiao Shang was like a dazzling comet that streaked across the Tiana continent, leaving behind a thick and colorful stroke in the history of the Tiana continent. Every era had a leading figure of that era, whether it was a single person or group of people. In Xiao Shang's era, the holy sons, saints, saintesses all seemed so dim in front of Xiao Shang. That was the era that belonged to Xiao Shang, and no one could compete with him. Some people even said that if the Tiana continent still had the power of the origin, Xiao Shang would have definitely become a quasi-sage, surpassing the previous quasi-sage ancestors of the Tiana continent. Nangong Yin didn't expect to meet Xiao Shang here. It was as if she was in a dream. Nangong Yin, who liked to read all kinds of ancient books, didn't know the history of the Tiana continent like the back of her hand, but she definitely knew a lot about it. According to those ancient books, the famous people of the Tiana continent, including those quasi-sages, if you asked Nangong Yin who she worshipped the most, the answer would not be those quasi-sages, but Xiao Shang. Only Xiao Shang was worshipped by Nangong Yin. Nangong Yin even thought more than once that if she was born in the era of Xiao Shang, would she be like other women, hopelessly falling in love with such a man? Nangong Yan's pair of beautiful eyes had countless little stars, but Gu Lingyao was more shocked. Hearing about Xiao Shang's experience from Nangong Yan, Gu Lingyao was also shocked, but she didn't have the slightest admiration, because in Gu Lingyao's heart, there was only one person, and that was Xiao Chen. Moreover, Gu Lingyao firmly believed that Xiao Chen's future wouldn't be much worse than Xiao Shang's. He would also be able to be like Xiao Shang, leading the way in his own era, sweeping away all the holy sons and saintesses. Unlike the two women, after listening to Nangong Yan's words, Xiao Chun had an indescribable feeling in his heart. Xiao Shang was his ancestor, and he had never thought that Xiao Shang would have such a glorious past. At this time, everyone's eyes were fixed on Xiao Shang, who was fighting fiercely in the sky. Like White Bones Saint, both of them were remnant souls, and their strength was only equivalent to the Tao transformation realm. However, in the face of White Bones Saint's remnant soul, Xiao Shang's remnant soul was obviously stronger. Just now, Xiao Shang had firmly suppressed White Bones Saint. White Bones Saint was wrapped in black qi, while Xiao Shang's golden light shone brightly. The golden light that filled the sky seemed to be able to dispel the darkness, firmly suppressing White Bone Saint's black qi. In the blink of an eye, more than 100 moves had passed. At this time, Xiao Shang's palm hit White Bone Saint's chest. For a moment, White Bone Saint flew backward, and his figure became even more illusory. It seemed that he was not far from dissipating. "Give up. You're no match for me," Xiao Shang said indifferently after seriously injuring White Bone Saint with one blow. Hearing Xiao Sheng's words, White-boned Saint gritted his teeth, and his eyes were full of unwillingness and anger. From Xiao Sheng's words, he could hear indifference, contempt, and disdain. They were both saints, but in Xiao Sheng's eyes, White-boned Saint, was like an ant. How could White-boned Saint accept this? Forcibly stopping himself, White-boned Saint's face gradually became hideous. He laughed wildly and said, "Ha ha, Xiao Sheng, you want to stop me from leaving my inheritance? I won't let you have your way. Today, I'll make you watch how I leave my inheritance behind." Ha ha. As soon as he finished speaking, the black chi around White-boned Saint's body suddenly surged and instantly enveloped Xiao Sheng. At the same time, the wisp of White-boned Saint's soul also began to dissipate slowly. It was clear that he had exhausted all the energy in this wisp of Saint's soul in order to deal a fatal blow to Xiao Sheng. The black chi was hazy and soon formed a black ball around Xiao Sheng. Xiao Sheng's figure was enveloped by the black ball. As for White-boned Saint, he had already dissipated. Tai Saint. Seeing White-boned Saint's desperate attack, Nangong Yin called out tearfully. It was clear that her heart was full of concern for Xiao Sheng. Yishuan really didn't know how this little girl felt about Xiao Sheng. They were not from the same era, but it seemed that Nangong Yin was hopelessly in love with Xiao Sheng. Yishuan couldn't confirm Xiao Sheng's situation in the black ball. However, just as White-boned Saint exhausted the power of this wisp of Saint soul to launch a desperate attack, on the other side, where Su Tianzi was, there was another wisp of White-boned Saint soul. There was another wisp of White-boned Saint soul here. When White-boned Saint died, he used a secret technique to leave behind two wisps of Saint soul. Perhaps this was something Xiao Sheng didn't expect. Therefore, even though Xiao Sheng killed one wisp of Saint soul, the remaining wisp of Saint soul directly disappeared with Su Tianzi and went straight to the top of the black volcano. "Boy, come with me." White-boned Saint reached out his hand towards Su Tianzi, and the two of them immediately disappeared from the spot. Just as Su Tianzi disappeared, the black ball, where Xiao Sheng was gradually torn apart, and rays of golden light shot out. Finally, accompanied by a muffled sound, the black ball was completely shattered by Xiao Sheng, and the white-robed figure appeared in front of everyone again. Seeing that Xiao Sheng had broken the White-boned Saint's desperate attack, Nangong Yin cried out happily, and Xiao Qin secretly heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, Xiao Sheng finally surrendered his gaze to Xiao Chun and the others below. The previous attack had exhausted the power of the wisp of White-boned Saint's soul. At this time, the wisp of Saint's soul had disappeared. With Xiao Sheng's gaze, Nangong Yan's face turned red, but Xiao Sheng's gaze did not fall on her at all. Instead, it was fixed on Xiao Chun. After a simple glance at everyone, Xiao Sheng's gaze fixed on Xiao Chun, and a hint of shock flashed in his eyes. Then, without any movement from Xiao Sheng's figure strangely appeared in front of Xiao Chun. At the same time, Xiao Sheng waved his hand, and Gu Lingyao, Nangong Yin, and the other Tianfeng Shengzong disciples directly fainted. Obviously, there were some words that he did not want the others to hear. After causing them to faint, Xiao Sheng looked at Xiao Chun and asked, "Are you from the Xiao clan of the Tianjin continent?" Xiao Sheng felt a familiar bloodline aura from Xiao Chun. It was an aura that only the members of the Xiao clan had. Moreover, Xiao Qin's bloodline aura was extremely rich, almost comparable to Xiao Sheng's. Of course, Xiao Sheng's wisp of Saint Soul did not have any memories after that, and he did not know that Xiao Sheng's bloodline power was originally obtained from Xiao Sheng, so naturally, it was not weaker than Xiao Sheng's. In the face of Xiao Sheng's inquiry, Xiao Chun did not deny it. He nodded and admitted his identity, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter, Chapter 657. Facing Xiao Sheng again, Xiao Qin's feelings were a little complicated. As if he had guessed Xiao Qin's thoughts, Xiao Sheng asked with a chuckle, "Why, have you seen me before?" Facing Xiao Sheng's inquiry, Xiao Chun did not hide anything and told him the truth about the Tianqian continent. After hearing Xiao Chen's story, Xiao Sheng fell silent. The saint soul in front of him was left behind by Xiao Sheng when he was in the Tianqian continent. It had been sleeping in the sacred tomb and had no memory of what happened after that, so it naturally did not know about the Tianqian continent and the Blood Demon continent. After learning that his physical body and body had fallen, Xiao Sheng's saint soul was obviously not prepared. After a moment of silence, Xiao Sheng sighed softly. Is that so? Haha, it's fate. Xiao Sheng didn't seem to be too sad about what Xiao Chen had told him. He only said a few words faintly. Hearing this, Xiao Chen did not know what to say, but at this moment, Xiao Sheng suddenly smiled and said, "It seems that the saint soul I left behind back then was really the will of the heavens." Xiao Sheng said inexplicably. Xiao Chen naturally did not know what this meant, because Xiao Chen had not broken through to the saint realm, so he was very unfamiliar with everything about the saint realm. As everyone knew, once a cultivator broke through to the saint realm, it was equivalent to a sublimation of life level. Not only the physical body, but the soul would also transform into a saint soul. Because of the sublimation of life level, the vitality of a saint could be said to be extremely tenacious. Now that Xiao Sheng had a saint soul left behind, it meant that he could still be resurrected. As long as there was a saint's soul and some heaven-defying methods, a saint realm cultivator could be resurrected, but it was very difficult. When he was in the Tianqian continent, the saint soul that had broken through to the quasi-saint realm could also be resurrected, but there were no such treasures and opportunities in the Tianqian continent. Secondly, when the Blood Demon continent invaded, Xiao Chun could not stand by and watch. In order to resist the Blood Demon continent, Xiao Sheng could only use the last of his strength. With a smile on his face, Xiao Sheng looked at Xiao Chun and said, "Little guy, it seems that the heavens did not want me to die. Your ancestor still has a chance of survival." Xiao Sheng said without hiding anything from Xiao Chun. Hearing this, Xiao Chun was stunned at first, but he quickly reacted and was overjoyed. Xiao Sheng was his ancestor, and, at the same time, the person he respected the most. If there was really a chance for him to be resurrected, Xiao Chun would naturally be happy for him. However, before Xiao Chun could be happy for long, Xiao Sheng continued, "However, if I want to pursue this chance of survival, I still need a few things. These things are still out of your reach for the time being, but there's a treasure that you must obtain as soon as possible. Otherwise, this ancestor's remnant soul won't be able to hold on for long." There were many conditions for Xiao Sheng to be resurrected, and Xiao Chun obviously couldn't fulfill these conditions with his current strength. Moreover, Xiao Sheng, who was only a remnant soul, couldn't casually consume his own strength if he wanted to be resurrected. Otherwise, once the power of this remnant soul was exhausted, there would be nothing he could do. Xiao Chun didn't need to think about the other treasures for the time being. However, there was one thing that Xiao Chun had to get back as soon as possible. According to Xiao Sheng, when he was traveling in the Tianqian continent, he accidentally found a heavenly spiritual pool, and this heavenly spiritual pool was the key to whether or not Xiao Sheng could be resurrected. This was because only by relying on the power of the heavenly spiritual pool could Xiao Sheng use a secret technique to construct a secret realm in Xiao Chen's body, and then let his remnant soul nourish in Xiao Chen's body to ensure that the remnant soul wouldn't be destroyed. At the same time, it slowly nourished the power of the remnant soul, and then perfected his remnant soul, turning it into a real remnant soul. Only then could he prepare for his resurrection. Xiao Chun had never heard of the heavenly spiritual pool, but Xiao Chun knew about the spiritual pool. When he was in the Nine-Cloud Palace in the Tianqian continent, Xiao Chun had used the spiritual pool to cultivate. The simplest explanation for the heavenly spiritual pool was that it was an existence that was one level higher than the spiritual pool. This heavenly spiritual pool was something that he had to obtain. Fortunately, the location of the heavenly spiritual pool that Xiao Sheng had discovered was extremely secretive. It shouldn't have fallen into the hands of any forces, which saved him a lot of trouble. He didn't intend to tell anyone about his existence. After all, Xiao Shang could be said to be powerless now, and the only person he could trust was Xiao Chun. He told Xiao Chun his thoughts. Hearing this, Xiao Chun nodded and said, "Then let's go back to Tianfeng Shengzong first, and then I'll go to the heavenly spiritual pool with the ancestor. We'll get the heavenly spiritual pool first." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Xiao Sheng smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. We're not in a hurry, but I'm afraid I'll have to rely on your body for a long time. Also, don't tell anyone about me. It won't do you any good." Xiao Sheng reminded. A remnant soul was very attractive to a cultivator, so before Xiao Sheng was resurrected, or before he had the ability to protect himself, he couldn't reveal his existence. Hearing Xiao Sheng's reminder, Xiao Chen nodded and agreed. Then the two of them talked for a while. Finally, Xiao Sheng entered Xiao Chen's body and used Xiao Chen's body as a safe haven for his divine soul. He didn't expect to be able to see Xiao Sheng again, and Xiao Chun actually had the possibility of being resurrected. Xiao Chen's heart was filled with mixed feelings, but he was also happy. However, there were many difficulties in resurrecting Xiao Sheng. Just now, Xiao Sheng had briefly mentioned a few treasures needed for his resurrection. These treasures were the most precious things in the world, and most of them were in the hands of the ancient sacred sect. The ancient sacred sect was more powerful than Tianfeng Shengzong. It could be said that it was the real overlord of the Tiana continent. In Tianfeng Shengzong, there was only one saint, the Tianfeng saint. Although the number of saints in the ancient sacred sect was uncertain, it was definitely more than one. This was because the ancient sacred sect already had as many as 3 saints, and these were only the saints that the ancient sacred sect put on the surface. It was unknown whether there were other saints in the ancient sacred sect in the dark. The treasures needed to resurrect Xiao Sheng could be regarded as the most precious treasures in the ancient sacred sect. Therefore, it was no different from a fool's dream for Xiao Chun to obtain these treasures from the ancient sacred sect. Even if he broke through to the saint realm, it would be very difficult for him to obtain them. However, even if there was only a glimmer of hope, Xiao Chun didn't want to give up. He wanted to resurrect Xiao Sheng. Moreover, Xiao Sheng had said that as long as Xiao Chun could find the heavenly spiritual pool, Xiao Sheng's divine soul could be slowly nourished in Xiao Chen's body. In this way, Xiao Chun would have a lot of time to prepare other treasures. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 658. Using Xiao Chen's body as an attachment, it could be said that Xiao Chen's body was the home of Xiao Sheng's remnant soul. At least before he was resurrected, he needed to survive in Xiao Chen's body. However, this was not without benefits for Xiao Chen. The biggest benefit was naturally in terms of cultivation. As the strongest saint in the Tianhe continent, the cultivation methods and martial skills in Xiao Sheng's remnant soul were of great help to Xiao Chun. Moreover, Xiao Sheng and Xiao Chun were both sword cultivators. For Xiao Chun, this was simply like a fish in water. Okay, little guy, let's leave. This holy mausoleum has no value, and the inheritance of this white bone is useless to you. In his mind, Xiao Sheng's voice sounded. Hearing this, Xiao Chen nodded slightly. At the same time, Gu Lingyao, Nangong Yin, and the others also woke up one after another. Just now, everyone had been knocked unconscious by Xiao Sheng. Now that they had woken up, the first thing Nangong Yin asked about was Xiao Sheng. Looking at Xiao Chun, Nangong Yin asked nervously, "Senior Xiao Chun, where is the Tai Saint, Senior Xiao Sheng?" They had already looked around, but they could not find Xiao Sheng. In this regard, Xiao Chun naturally could not tell Nangong Yin that Xiao Sheng was in his body. He could only find a random reason. Senior Xiao Sheng has disappeared. After all, he is just a remnant soul, Xiao Chun replied. Hearing that Xiao Sheng had disappeared, Nangong Yin could not help but feel disappointed. After a moment of silence, she said, "Then what did Senior Xiao Sheng say to you just now?" "Nothing. He just told us to leave this place as soon as possible," Xiao Chun replied. Now that Xiao Sheng had disappeared, everyone naturally left the holy mausoleum under Xiao Chen's lead. At first glance, Xiao Chen did not seem to have obtained anything in the holy mausoleum of the White-Boned Saint. In fact, Xiao Chen's harvest this time could be said to be extremely rich. Because he had met Xiao Sheng, not only did Xiao Chen see the hope of Xiao Sheng's resurrection, but with Xiao Sheng by his side, the inheritance of the White-Boned Saint could not compare to the benefits. There was no doubt that the White-Boned Saint and the Tai Saint were stronger. With Xiao Sheng, of course, only a fool. Su Tianze was probably still excited about obtaining the inheritance of the White-Boned Saint. He did not know that the real big opportunity had already been taken away by Xiao Chen. Under Xiao Sheng's command, the group safely left the holy mausoleum of the White-Boned Saint. Everyone sighed when they returned to the Fengyuan Mountains. Okay, I should leave the Fengyuan Mountains too, Xiao Chen said to everyone. Hearing this, everyone nodded. Seeing this, Xiao Chen looked at Nangong Yin and Gu Lingyao and told them about Li Guden and his father. Xiao Chen's intention was very simple. He wanted Li Guden and his father to leave the Fengyuan Mountains. He hoped that Tian Fengxingzong would remove the arrest warrant for them. This matter wasn't difficult for Nangong Yin. With the strength of the Nangong family and Nangong Yi, an elder of the Glory sect, she only needed to say a word to settle the matter of Li Guden and his son. Nangong Yin agreed to Xiao Chen's request immediately. She promised that once they returned to family Nangong, she would send people to pick up Li Guden and his father. At the same time, Nangong Yi would remove the arrest warrant for Li Guden and his father as an elder of Glory sect. Gu Lingyao also agreed to talk to her father, Gu Qi, to let Li Guden's father become an elder of Tianqi sect. As for Li Guden, he could also enter Tianqi's sect to cultivate. With the matter of Li Guden and his father settled, the group followed the original route and left the Fengyuan Mountains. Without Su Tianze causing trouble, the group did not meet with any danger along the way. After a few days, the group entered the southern region of Tianfeng Mansion. Then, they used the teleportation portal and returned to Nangong City, where family Nangong was located. Nangong City was the headquarters of family Nangong. When Xiao Chen and the group walked out of the teleportation portal, the head of family Nangong, who was also Nangong Yan's father, was already waiting for them. Nangong Yan's father was called Nangong Tian. Seeing that his daughter was safe and sound, Nangong Tian finally revealed a smile on his face. The father and daughter hugged each other and comforted the Nangong Yan. Then, Nangong Tian turned his gaze to Xiao Chen and the rest. The smile on his face did not fade. He walked up to Xiao Chen and said gently, "You must be Xiao Chen, my dear nephew. Thank you so much for saving my daughter's life." Evidently, he had heard about Xiao Chen from Nangong Yi. He also knew that Xiao Chen was the 10th direct disciple of Tian Fengxingzong. Hence, Xiao Chen replied politely to Nangong Tian's thanks. Just like that, the group stayed at family Nangong. That night, Nangong Tian held a banquet to thank Xiao Chen. During the banquet, Nangong Tian also made it clear that if Xiao Chen needed any help, family Nangong would definitely help him as long as it was within their means. Obviously, it was to thank Xiao Chen for saving the Nangong Yan. After the banquet, Xiao Chen returned to his courtyard. At this moment, Xiao Sheng's voice rang in his mind. "Little brat, this family Nangong is quite powerful. Since that's the case, you can ask them to help you collect some heavenly treasures that you need." Xiao Sheng requested the family Nangong to help him find some heavenly treasures. Xiao Chen did not reject his request. Under Xiao Sheng's instructions, Xiao Chen memorized dozens of heavenly treasures and elixirs. Some of these items were needed by Xiao Sheng, while some were needed by Xiao Chen for his cultivation. Of course, Xiao Sheng was the one who told Xiao Chen about these items. It was indeed very troublesome for Xiao Chen to collect these items by himself. However, it would be much easier with the help of the family Nangong. Furthermore, Xiao Chen was not asking for free. He was only asking the family Nangong for help. After they found them, Xiao Chen would naturally buy them at the market price. Therefore, the family Nangong had no reason to reject his request. After memorizing the dozens of heavenly treasures, Xiao Chun told Nangong Tian about it the next day. In the end, Nangong Tian agreed to Xiao Chen's request after a casual glance. Although the items that Xiao Chun needed were very precious, they were not considered priceless treasures. Therefore, Nangong Tian agreed without hesitation. After all, this was a very simple matter for the family Nangong. After staying at the family Nangong for 3 days, Xiao Chun and the rest were preparing to return to Tianfeng Shengzhou. Before they left, the Nangong Yin personally sent Xiao Chun to the teleportation formation. Looking at Xiao Chun, the Nangong Yin said with a smile, "Senior Xiao Chun, I will go to Tianfeng Shengzhou to look for you and Senior Gu soon. You have to protect me then. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 659. Nangong Yin was not a disciple of Tianfeng Shengzhou. After all, families were different from sections. For sects like the Iron Sword sect, their disciples would usually join Tianfeng Shengzhou. However, family Nangong was different. Their disciples, especially their direct descendants, would usually choose to stay in the family to cultivate. That was why Nangong Yin did not join Tianfeng Shengzhou. However, after what happened this time, she suddenly decided to join Tianfeng Shengzhou. Nangong Tian was a little helpless about this. Unfortunately, he could not resist Nangong Yan's coaxing and pestering. In the end, he could only nod and agree. As the eldest daughter of family Nangong, it was not difficult for Nangong Yin to join Tianfeng Shengzhou to cultivate. After all, Nangong Yi was an elder of Tianfeng Shengzhou. Although he did not have any real power, he could arrange for one person to join Tianfeng Shengzhou. Hearing Nangong Yan's words, Xiao Chun smiled and nodded. "Okay, I'll treat you to a big meal at the Cool Breeze restaurant when you come." Cool Breeze restaurant? You said it yourself. You can't go back on your words. Hearing this, Nangong Yin was delighted. She had heard of the Cool Breeze restaurant before, so she naturally knew that the dishes and wine there were very unusual. After making the agreement, Xiao Chun and Gu Lingyao stepped into the transmitting formation and headed for Southern Border City. In Southern Border City, Xiao Chun was warmly received by family Nangong Yi. Nangong Yi also told Xiao Chun about Li Guden and his son. He told Xiao Chun that their arrest warrant had been lifted and that family Nangong's people were already on their way to Fengyue Mountains. When they arrived, family Nangong would arrange for them to be escorted to the Tianchi sect. Xiao Chun naturally expressed his gratitude. As for Li Guden, Xiao Chun might not have anything to do with him in the future. However, Li Guden and his son were not bad people, so it was not a problem for Xiao Chun to help them. After staying in Southern Border City for only one night, Xiao Chun and his people returned to Tianfeng Prefecture City the next morning. This time, they did not stay in Tianfeng Prefecture City. They directly returned to Tianfeng Shengzhou. After sending Gu Lingyao back, Xiao Chun brought the disciples to Yifeng and told them everything that had happened in Fengyue Mountains, including the White Bone Saint's sacred tomb and how he had killed 5 disciples. Yifeng obviously did not care that Xiao Chun had killed 5 ordinary disciples in the sacred mausoleum of the White Bone Saint. He cared more about the sacred mausoleum of the White Bone Saint. After hearing Xiao Chen's story, Yifeng thought to himself, "I didn't expect the White Bone Saint's sacred tomb to be in Fengyue Mountains. It seems that I have to inform the Lord's sacred master about this." The matter of the Saint Mausoleum was no small matter, so Yifeng took it very seriously. However, Xiao Chen knew very well that the Saint Mausoleum of the White Bone Saint could no longer be opened because there was no key. The only way to open the mausoleum was if a saint forcibly tore the space apart, but that had nothing to do with Xiao Chun. As for how Tianfeng Shengzhou was going to deal with the sacred tomb of the White Bone Saint, Xiao Chun did not care. After briefing Yifeng, Xiao Chun took his leave. Yifeng hurried to the Tianfeng Saint's residence. The Tianfeng Saint's residence had been moved to the personal disciples area. On the way back, Xiao Shang sighed. Tianfeng Shengzhou? I didn't know about it before, but I do know about the Tianfeng Saint. I didn't expect that kid to have broken through to the saint realm. Xiao Sheng had never heard of Tianfeng Shengzong. In his era, there was no Tianfeng Shengzong, but Xiao Sheng knew about the Tianfeng saint. However, from Xiao Sheng's tone, it was not difficult to tell that the Tianfeng saint was just a child in Xiao Sheng's eyes. After being away for some time, Xiao Chun finally returned to Tianfeng Shengzong. It was rare for Xiao Chun to be able to relax. He returned to his residence, which was the residence of the 10th personal disciple. Seeing that Xiao Chun had returned, the four maids were very happy. Originally, Xiao Sheng planned to go to the Heavenly Spirit Lake immediately, but he asked Xiao Chun to wait for a few days. After all, thousands of years had passed, and the Tiana continent had undergone earth-shaking changes. Xiao Sheng still needed to follow the current map of the Tiana continent to find the exact location of the Heavenly Spirit Lake. After asking Xiao Chun to be patient, Xiao Chun was able to relax for the next few days. Every day, apart from cultivating, he spent time with the little girl, Guling Yao. It was worth mentioning that during this period, Nangong Yin had successfully entered Tianfeng Shengzong, but he was just an ordinary disciple. Nangong Yin didn't care about this. And Xiao Chun also kept his promise and invited Nangong Yin, Guling Yao, Mu Feng, and other good friends to have a big meal together at the Qingfeng restaurant. The days passed very peacefully, and during these days, in addition to constantly searching for the whereabouts of the Heavenly Spirit Lake through the records, Xiao Sheng was also shocked by Xiao Chen's cultivation talent. At first, he only thought that Xiao Chen's talent was not bad, but later, Xiao Sheng was completely sure that Xiao Chen's talent had definitely reached the level of the Holy Sun, or even higher. Even compared to Xiao Sheng, Xiao Chen's talent was definitely above the first tier. In other words, Xiao Chen's talent was above Xiao Sheng's. At the same time, Xiao Sheng was even more shocked by Xiao Chen's tempered battle body and heavenly sword embryo. Xiao Sheng didn't know much about the heavenly sword embryo, but he was very clear that the heavenly sword embryo was simply the strongest physique for a sword cultivator. Compared to the heavenly sword embryo, Xiao Sheng knew a lot about the tempered battle body. It was the strongest body refining technique in the Tiana continent, and this was not just for show. After knowing these two secrets of Xiao Chun, even Xiao Sheng couldn't help but sigh. "You little brat, I really don't know what kind of luck you have to be able to obtain such a peerless opportunity." Needless to say, the heavenly sword embryo, but this tempered battle body, TSK, it seems that it won't be long before the holy sons and holy daughters of the Tiana continent will suffer again. Haha, think about it. If they know that in addition to me, Xiao Sheng, an even more abnormal monster has appeared in the Xiao clan. At that time, the holy sons and holy daughters of the same generation won't be able to raise their heads. Interesting. Xiao Sheng was sure that as long as Xiao Chun was given a little more time, Xiao Chun would definitely be able to reach his former height, or even more abnormal. In the past, Xiao Sheng suppressed all the holy sons and holy daughters of the Tiana continent with his own strength. Now, Xiao Sheng seemed to be able to see Xiao Chun, just like himself, ruthlessly trampling the holy sons and holy daughters of this era under his feet, leading the glory of an era alone. Xiao Sheng laughed happily. Hearing this, Xiao Chun was also curious and couldn't help but ask, "Old ancestor, are the holy sons and holy daughters of the Tiana continent very powerful? How do they compare to the personal disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation." End of chapter. Chapter 660. Xiao Chun had heard a lot of rumors about the holy sons and holy daughters, but he had never come into contact with them. Therefore, Xiao Chun was very curious about the holy sons and holy daughters of the Tiana continent. However, after hearing Xiao Chen's words, Xiao Shen curled his lips and said, "Kid, don't take my word for it. I only said that you are talented, but with your current strength, you are nothing compared to the son of Saint. You can't be compared at all." Xiao Sheng was not afraid of hurting Xiao Chen's feelings, and he spoke bluntly. The gap between the holy sons and holy daughters was equivalent to the gap between the holy sons and the king of geniuses. In the Tianfeng Sheng zone, the king of geniuses could only become a core disciple. The gap between the holy sons and holy daughters was even greater than the gap between the holy sons and the king of geniuses. One must know that those who could become the holy sons and holy daughters naturally had the best talent, at least in the Tiana continent. Moreover, to cultivate a holy son, the amount of resources needed was simply an astronomical figure. As for the astronomical level, let's put it this way. Tianfeng Sheng zone was powerful enough, right? It was the absolute overlord of the Tianfeng prefecture. But even if Tianfeng Sheng zone went bankrupt and spent all the resources in the sect on one person, it still wouldn't be enough to cultivate a holy son. With the strength of Tianfeng Sheng zone, it couldn't even cultivate a holy son. Therefore, in the entire Tiana continent, the only sect with a holy son and holy daughter was a true overlord like the ancient sage sect. A holy son or holy daughter was not something that could be cultivated with talent and hard work. It also required countless resources. The three most important factors for a warrior's cultivation were talent, hard work, and cultivation resources. If one wanted to become a holy son or holy daughter, it could be said that all three were indispensable. After hearing Xiao Sheng's merciless explanation, Xiao Chun was not depressed at all. On the contrary, he was a little excited. So, in order to become a holy son or a holy daughter, one must enter the ancient sage sect? In Tianfeng Sheng zone, I won't be able to become the holy son even if I spend my whole life. Is that so, ancestor? Yes, you have to go to the ancient sacred sect. Not only that, you have to make the upper echelons of the ancient sacred sect value you and be willing to use all their resources on you. Only then will you have a chance to become a holy son, Xiao Sheng said with certainty. Ancestor, did you also join a sect like the ancient saints sect to become the holy son? Xiao Chun continued to ask. According to Xiao Sheng, cultivation resources were indispensable if one wanted to become a holy son. Back then, Xiao Sheng had come to the Tiana continent alone. Therefore, he was able to suppress all the holy sons and holy daughters of that era. It was obvious that Xiao Sheng had joined a sect comparable to an ancient sacred sect. In the face of Xiao Qin's question, Xiao Sheng fell into silence this time, as if he did not want to recall this matter. After a while, Xiao Sheng replied faintly, "Yes, I did once join a sect comparable to the ancient sacred sect." He admitted Xiao Qin's guess, but did not say much. Seeing this, Xiao Chun did not ask any more questions. In the courtyard, Xiao Sheng and Xiao Chun both fell into silence. Perhaps because the atmosphere was a little awkward, Xiao Sheng deliberately laughed loudly and said, "Don't think so much, kid. You are still far from becoming a holy son or holy daughter. Just talking about the top 10 direct disciples of Tianfeng Sheng zone, you are now ranked at the bottom. When you become the first direct disciple, you can think about becoming a holy son or holy daughter." As soon as Xiao Sheng's voice fell, Gu Lingyao came to the door. In the past few days, Gu Lingyao came to Xiao Chun every day. Skipping into the courtyard, Gu Lingyao said to Xiao Chun with a smile, "Big brother Xiao Chun, are you cultivating?" "Yeah. Why are you here?" Xiao Chun replied after hearing the question. "I'm bored. Can you accompany me to the Tianfeng prefecture for a stroll?" "I've been bored to death these past few days," said Gu Lingyao coquettishly. This little girl was born with an unstable personality. While the two of them were talking, Xiao Sheng, who was inside Xiao Qin's body, revealed a solemn expression and muttered softly, "Don't tell me this little girl is—" Xiao Sheng seemed to have noticed something from Gu Lingyao, but he did not say it because he himself was not sure. While Xiao Chun was enjoying a rare moment of peace, far away from the ancient holy state, on another territory of the Sky River mainland, there was a group of majestic palaces surrounded by mountains. The palaces seemed to be scattered everywhere, but every building emitted a faint white radiance, as though they were shrines. One couldn't help but want to bow down and worship them. In the most majestic hall, in the center of the group of palaces, several illusory figures clad in silver moon robes gathered together. Their faces couldn't be seen clearly, but their bodies were enveloped in a layer of golden light. They sat together in a circle, and one of them said indifferently, "There's news. That little girl is in Tianfeng Zone." Tianfeng Zone? Is it in the territory of the ancient holy state? Another person asked. Yes, it's about time. That little girl has had enough of being crazy. It's time to bring her back. Yes. Then let Yunwan take her there. They seemed to be talking casually, but in the end, a young girl also clad in silver moon robes strode into the hall. The young girl was tall and slender. Her appearance could not be said to be beautiful, but the domineering aura that involuntarily exuded from between her brows was eye-catching. As a woman, she had a domineering aura that made men concede defeat. From this, one could see how extraordinary she was. With a calm expression, the young girl came to the hall and bowed to the illusory figures in front of her. Greetings, sacred masters. Yunwan, go to the Heavenly Wind Saint sect immediately and bring that little girl back, one of the figures said after hearing Yunwan's words. Yes. Yunwan simply nodded in response, then turned and left the hall. This group of palaces was like a paradise. It was the location of one of the 4 major sects of the Sky River mainland, the Sacred Een sect. Yunwan was the Sacred Een sect's saintess. The Sacred Een sect was a powerful sect on the same level as the ancient holy state. It ruled over one of the 4 major provinces of the Sky River mainland, the Sacred Een province. The illusory figures in silver moon robes were all saints. There were actually 3 saints. As for the little girl they were talking about, it was actually none other than Gu Lingyao. However, Xiao Chun, who was far away in Tianfeng Zone, obviously did not know about the Sacred Een sect's actions. He did not expect that it would not be long before the greatest humiliation of Xiao Chun's life would befall him. And the instigator of all this was the overlord of the Sky River mainland, the Sacred Een sect, and the unattainable saintess, Yunwan. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 661. Xiao Chun naturally didn't know about the actions of the Sacred Een sect. After several days of peace, Xiao Sheng finally found the location of the heavenly spiritual pool. However, after finding the location of the heavenly spiritual pool, Xiao Sheng didn't show the slightest hint of joy. On the contrary, his expression was solemn. In the room, Xiao Chun and Xiao Sheng sat opposite each other. Facing the illusory figure of Xiao Sheng, Xiao Chun looked at the map on the table and frowned. Old ancestor, what's wrong? Early in the morning, Xiao Sheng had told him that he had found a location of the heavenly spiritual pool. It should have been something to be happy about, but Xiao Sheng's expression was solemn, which made Xiao Chun somewhat puzzled. Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Xiao Sheng said softly, "The location of the heavenly spiritual pool should be in the Wind Plains. You should have heard of the Wind Plains, right?" In the Wind Plains, Xiao Chun was stunned when he heard Xiao Sheng's words. However, Xiao Chun quickly understood why Xiao Sheng was acting like this. In the heavenly Wind Mansion, the Wind Plains was definitely the most famous place. As for the reason, it wasn't because of the scenery or anything else, but because of the dangers of the Wind Plains. Simply put, the Wind Plains was a plain. However, compared to ordinary plains, the Wind Plains was filled with strong winds that could tear a cultivator's body to shreds. Strong winds blew all year round in the Wind Plains, and these strong winds could be said to be sharp blades. Cultivators below the Tao King realm would die upon contact. As for cultivators above the Tao King realm, they could only move around the periphery of the Wind Plains. There were even rumors that even saints didn't dare to casually enter the Wind Plains. This was because the closer one was to the center of the Wind Plains, the stronger the wind would be. It was known as one of the 4 great death zones of the Heavenly River continent and the most dangerous place in the ancient Saint province. With the heavenly spiritual pool being located in such a place, Xiao Chun had no way of going there. With Xiao Chun's cultivation, he would probably be torn to pieces the moment he stepped into the Wind Plains. It was because of this that Xiao Sheng's expression was so solemn. If he wanted to revive, he first needed the heavenly spiritual pool. Although he knew the exact location of the heavenly spiritual pool, Xiao Chun had no way of entering it. A solemn expression was also revealed on their faces as the two of them descended into silence. This feeling was as though there was a piece of fatty meat placed in front of you, but you were unable to obtain it. It caused one to feel extremely unwilling, but there was nothing one could do about it. After a moment of silence, Xiao Chun was the first to break the silence. Old ancestor, do you know the location of other heavenly spiritual pools? Since he couldn't obtain this heavenly spiritual pool, Xiao Chun naturally wanted to find other heavenly spiritual pools. Hearing this, Xiao Sheng smiled helplessly. Do you think this heavenly spiritual pool is cabbage? Even spiritual pools are extremely rare, let alone heavenly spiritual pools. In an entire heavenly river continent, the number of heavenly spiritual pools can be counted on one hand. Not to mention that I don't know the location of other heavenly spiritual pools. Even if I knew, I'm afraid you wouldn't be able to do anything. Either it's in a death zone like this heavenly spiritual pool, or it's under the control of a powerful sect like the Ancient Saint sect. It was impossible for him to have any ideas about the other heavenly spiritual pools. Xiao Sheng directly cut off Xiao Chen's idea. Since it was impossible to find other heavenly spiritual pools, there were only two paths in front of him. He could either give up or find a way to enter the wind plane. However, entering the wind plane was easier said than done. Old ancestor, is there no way to enter the wind plane? Xiao Chen looked at Xiao Sheng and asked again. If you break through to the Saint Realm, there may be a glimmer of hope. Xiao Sheng replied. If I break through to the Saint Realm, I may be able to enter the wind plane. Hearing this, Xiao Chan was speechless. He was only at the beginning of the Tao Vindication Realm. He was still far from the Saint Realm, not to mention other things. Even if he waited until he broke through to the Saint Realm, Xiao Sheng's Saint Soul would have already turned into thin air. It seemed that even Xiao Sheng didn't have any way. Xiao Chan was also in despair. However, at this moment, Xiao Sheng's extremely solemn face suddenly revealed a smile. Actually, there's another way, but it needs to be prepared. Xiao Sheng deliberately kept Xiao Chun in suspense. Hearing this, Xiao Chun immediately said angrily, Old ancestor, are you joking with me? Haha. Hearing this, Xiao Sheng laughed heartily. He didn't care about Xiao Chen's dissatisfaction at all. In fact, the other method that Xiao Sheng mentioned was not easy. If one couldn't withstand the strong wind of the wind plane with their cultivation, then they could only rely on external forces. There were only two kinds of external forces. One was a defensive spiritual treasure, and the other was a talisman. There was no need to talk about defensive spiritual treasures. According to Xiao Sheng, as long as it was a defensive spiritual treasure above the heaven level, he should get as many as he could. The more, the better. As for talismans, in Xiao Sheng's memory, there was only one type of talisman that could withstand the strong wind of the wind plane. It was called the Black Armor Talisman. It was a saint-level defensive talisman. However, to refine this Black Armor Talisman, not only did it require a saint-level talisman master, but the materials needed were also extremely complicated and expensive. Therefore, it would not be easy to obtain the Black Armor Talisman. There was a way, but it would take some effort to obtain these things. Xiao Chen's intention was to find them for himself through the Tianqi sect and family Nangong. At the same time, Xiao Chen also tried to talk to Tianfeng Xingzong to see if Tianjin Xingzong could provide these things for him. Xiao Sheng naturally had no objections to Xiao Chen's idea. After all, Xiao Chen could only rely on the three major forces Tianfeng Xingzong, Tianqi sect, and family Nangong. However, according to Xiao Sheng's idea, only Tianjin Xingzong was willing to help could he obtain the Black Armor Talisman. The Tianqi sect and family Nangong's strength alone did not have much hope. Xiao Chen was thinking about how to obtain the Black Armor Talisman and some defensive spiritual treasures. Just like that, 3 days passed. On this day, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao were chatting in the courtyard. However, on the peak of Tianfeng's sacred mountain, A few guests had come from afar. In the main hall at the center of the peak of Tianfeng Sacred Mountain, Tianfeng Saint sat on the main seat while He Feng sat below him. In the center of the hall, 5 young girls stood proudly. The leader wore a silver moon robe and exuded a faint domineering aura. This group of people was none other than the disciples of Sacred Ene's sect. The leader of the group was the Holy Maiden of Sacred Ene's sect, Yunwan. Holy Maiden Yunwan, why have you come all the way to Tianfeng Shengzong? Tianfeng Saint looked at Yunwan and asked indifferently. Even as a saint, Tianfeng Saint could not ignore Yunwan. After all, she was the Holy Maiden of Sacred Ene's sect, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 662. The holy sons and saintesses were unreachable existences for all cultivators on the Tiana continent. What were the holy sons and saintesses? In layman's terms, they were the younger generation who were certain to break through to the saint realm. Wasn't that a bit boastful? There were actually people in the world who dared to say that they could break through to the saint realm, but that was the truth. The holy sons and holy daughters of the 4 sacred sects of the Tiana continent were all from a younger generation who could become saints with a 100% chance. As for the reason, it was very simple. It was because every holy son and saintess had comprehended the power of law. The energy of the laws was the greatest barrier to break through into the saint realm. Under normal circumstances, one would at least have to attain a cultivation at the half-saint realm in order to comprehend the energy of the laws. As for those personal disciples and existences with extraordinary natural talent, they would only have the opportunity to comprehend the energy of the laws when they attained the Tao Emperor realm at the earliest. But what about the holy sons and saintesses? Their cultivation might only be at the Tao King realm or the Tao Transformation realm, but through some heaven-defying means of the 4 great sacred sects, they had already comprehended the power of law. If they were able to comprehend the power of laws at this stage, then the holy sons and holy daughters will be able to break through to the saint realm in advance. As such, they only needed to slowly raise their cultivation base and let their bodies and souls complete the transformation, and they would definitely become a saint. Moreover, because the holy sons and saintesses had comprehended the power of law at a very early age, once they broke through to the saint realm, their comprehension and control of the power of law would obviously be far superior to ordinary saints. This was why the saints of the 4 great sacred sects were not only numerous, but also far stronger than ordinary saints. The holy sons and saintesses could be said to be future saints, so Saint Tianfeng naturally couldn't ignore them. Therefore, when he heard that Saintess Yunwan had arrived, Saint Tianfeng personally came out to receive her. Facing Saint Tianfeng's inquiry, Yunwan, who was in the center of the hall, remained calm. She didn't show the slightest bit of nervousness or panic because she was facing a saint. She calmly said, "Junior has come under the orders of the sect to ask for a person from Tianfeng Shengzong." "Oh, who is it?" "Guling Yao." Without beating around the bush, Yunwan directly stated the purpose of her visit. She had traveled thousands of miles from the Sacred Ene Prefecture to the ancient Saint Prefecture's Tianfeng Prefecture just for Guling Yao. After hearing Yunwan's reply, the Tianfeng Saint didn't seem to care about Guling Yao at all. He turned his head and looked at Yifeng. This Guling Yao is a new core disciple. He truthfully told Saint Tianfeng about Guling Yao's identity. Hearing this, Saint Tianfeng's expression didn't change, but in his heart, he had already decided to hand Guling Yao over to Yunwan. After all, Yunwan was representing the Sacred Ene sect. Although he didn't know why the Sacred Ene sect wanted to take away Guling Yao, Tianfeng Shengzong obviously couldn't offend the Sacred Ene sect for Guling Yao. Moreover, with Tianfeng Shengzong's strength, there was no way he could refuse in front of the Sacred Ene sect, unless Tianfeng Shengzong asked for help from the Ancient Saint sect. However, it wasn't worth it, and whether the Ancient Saint sect would help was another matter altogether. In short, Guling Yao wasn't worth Tianfeng Shengzong offending the Sacred Ene sect for her. The Tianfeng saint had already made up his mind, but what he didn't expect was that Yifeng had only said half of what he had said, making it seem as if the Tianfeng saint had already made up his mind. Yifeng continued, Lord Saint Tianfeng, Gu Lingyao is actually the fiancé of the 10th direct disciple, Shao Chun. The two of them are both from the celestial equal sect. Gu Lingyao and Shao Chun's relationship wasn't a secret to begin with. Moreover, as the Grand Elder of Tianfeng Xingzong, Yifeng was well aware of this matter. Hearing this, Saint Tianfeng was slightly taken aback. Shao Chun's fiancé? Saint Tianfeng vaguely felt that this matter might be a little troublesome. Saint Tianfeng naturally had a deep influence on Shao Chun. It could even be said that Saint Tianfeng had been secretly observing Shao Chun. Now that he heard that Gu Lingyao was Shao Chun's woman and that the sacred Yin sect wanted to take Gu Lingyao away, Saint Tianfeng was somewhat depressed. Based on Saint Tianfeng's understanding of Shao Chun clearly wouldn't agree to let the sacred Yin sect take away Gu Lingyao. After pondering for a moment, Saint Tianfeng looked at Yun Luan and said, Saintess Yun Luan, Gu Lingyao is a core disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong. If you want to take her away, you must have a reason, right? When it came to Shao Chun, the Tianfeng saint felt a little helpless. However, Yin Luan said indifferently, I've already said that this is an order from a sect. Tianfeng saint, isn't this a reason? Or are you going to refuse? When facing Saint Tianfeng, Yun Luan's words actually contained a hint of threat. It was as if she was saying that if Tianfeng Xingzong dared to refuse, then prepare to face the wrath of the sacred Yin sect. Saint Tianfeng naturally wasn't afraid of Yun Luan. Even if she was a saintess, she was still too young, and Saint Tianfeng could casually crush her. However, Yun Luan was backed by the sacred Yin sect, so Saint Tianfeng had no choice but to hold back. Furthermore, Yun Luan was a saintess, so Saint Tianfeng couldn't do anything to Yun Luan. If he dared to do anything to a saintess, he would be courting death. Seeing that Yun Luan was determined to do this, Saint Tianfeng didn't hesitate. After weighing the pros and cons, Saint Tianfeng finally decided that he couldn't provoke the sacred Yin sect. If that's the case, please wait for a moment. I'll have someone bring Gu Lingyao here. Thank you, Lord Saint Tianfeng. Yun Luan bowed and thanked Saint Tianfeng. Tianfeng Xingzong then asked Yifeng to personally bring Gu Lingyao here. He also explained to Shao Chun the stakes and told him that Gu Lingyao going to the sacred Yin sect wasn't a bad thing. It could even be said that it was an opportunity for her. He also asked Shao Chun not to stop her. Without knowing the reason why the sacred Yin sect had their eyes on Gu Lingyao, it was naturally a great opportunity in the eyes of others. Unfortunately, for Gu Lingyao, it wasn't an opportunity, but a disaster. It could also be said that it was fate. After receiving Saint Tianfeng's order, Yifeng immediately left the main hall and quickly arrived at Shao Chun's residence. Shao Chun, who was cultivating in the courtyard, saw Yifeng personally come and bowed in confusion. First Elder. Facing Shao Chun, Yifeng smiled slightly. At the same time, he unconsciously glanced at Gu Lingyao. Only then did he speak to Shao Chun. Shao Chun, I'm here to look for Gu Lingyao. Look for Lingyao? May I know what you're here for, First Elder? Shao Chun asked curiously. Faced with Shao Chun's question, First Elder laughed loudly. Haha, of course it's a good thing. Gu Lingyao's great opportunity has arrived. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 663. Because Yinluan didn't explain why the sacred Yin sect wanted to take Gu Lingyao away, Yifeng felt that this might be a great opportunity for Gu Lingyao. After all, the sacred Yin sect was one of the 4 sacred sects of the Tianhe mainland. If Gu Lingyao could cultivate in the sacred Yin sect, it would be 1,000 times better than staying in Tianfeng Xingzong. Hearing Yifeng's words, Shao Chun and Gu Lingyao looked at each other. Then Shao Chun asked, Please explain, Great Elder. For a moment, they didn't understand what Yifeng meant. After hearing Shao Chun's words, He Feng told Xiao Chun and Gu Lingyao the truth about Yun Wan and the others. Hearing that the Sacredine sect wanted to take away Gu Lingyao, Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with surprise. He already knew from He Feng that the Sacredine sect was in existence on the same level as the ancient sacred sects. For such a powerful sect to take away Gu Lingyao without giving a reason, it was really hard to understand. However, while Xiao Chun and Gu Lingyao were puzzled, Xiao Sheng inside Xiao Chen's body frowned and said, "The Sacredine sect sent people?" As expected, this little lass. Hearing that the Sacredine sect had sent people, Xiao Sheng seemed to have confirmed something, and his expression became incomparably solemn. Unaware of Xiao Sheng's thoughts, Xiao Chun and Gu Lingyao looked at each other. To be honest, Xiao Chun also felt that the arrival of Yun Wan and the others was an opportunity for Gu Lingyao. However, before Xiao Chun could speak, Xiao Sheng's voice rang in his mind. "Kid, this isn't an opportunity, but a desperate situation. Run as far as you can, unless you don't want this little girl to live." Xiao Sheng asked Xiao Chun to run away with Gu Lingyao. Hearing that, Xiao Chun was confused. What was going on? He immediately sent a voice transmission to Xiao Sheng. "Ancestor, what do you mean? Is Sacredine sect here to return Lingyao?" From Xiao Sheng's words, Xiao Chun could tell that the Sacredine sect had not come with good intentions. However, in the face of Xiao Chen's question, Xiao Sheng did not explain too much and only said in a heavy tone, "Don't ask so much. If you want that lass to live, you'd better run. If that lass really comes to Saint Ian's sect, I'm afraid she won't be able to survive. You'd better." "Sai, is it too late?" There was a trace of urgency in Xiao Sheng's words. Now is not the time to explain these things to Xiao Chun. However, before he could finish his sentence, Xiao Sheng sighed softly. It was still too late. As soon as Xiao Sheng finished speaking, Yun Wan and the 4 Sacredine sect disciples had already appeared in front of Xiao Chun and the others. Looking at Yun Wan and the others, Xiao Chun could already guess their identities without needing He Feng to say anything. They were obviously from Sacredine's sect. Yun Wan did not care about Xiao Chun at all. She looked directly at Gu Lingyao and said with a cold glint in her eyes, "You're Gu Lingyao?" In Yun Wan's eyes, there was only Gu Lingyao. She did not care about anyone else. Facing Yun Wan's calm and incomparably arrogant attitude, Xiao Chen's expression gradually turned cold. If it wasn't for Xiao Sheng, perhaps Xiao Chen would think that Sacredine sect arrival was indeed an opportunity for Gu Lingyao. But now, after hearing Xiao Sheng's words, although Xiao Sheng did not explain anything, Xiao Chen was certain that Sacredine sect's arrival was not an opportunity for Gu Lingyao, but a disaster. Xiao Chun did not have the slightest suspicion towards Xiao Sheng. He had no reason to harm him. Looking coldly at the 5 people led by Yun Wan, Xiao Chen asked, "Why do you want to bring Lingyao to Sacredine sect?" Xiao Chen's sudden question caused Yun Wan to look at Xiao Chun. Her expression did not change in the slightest as she said, "Do I need to answer you?" Yun Wan's eyes were filled with indifference. It was like an elephant looking at an ant. Xiao Chun was naturally unhappy about this, but the most important thing now was to protect Gu Lingyao. Xiao Sheng would definitely not speak without thinking. However, just as Xiao Chun was thinking about this, Yun Wan spoke again. "It seems that you want to protect her, don't you? An eyesore." Her tone was indifferent and did not contain the slightest bit of emotion. As her voice fell, Yun Wan pointed out a finger and a silver-white light flashed. Seeing this, although Xiao Chun reacted immediately and crossed his arms in front of his chest, the terrifying power of Yun Wan's casual finger made Xiao Chun unable to resist at all. Like a kite with a broken string, Xiao Chun was directly sent flying. He fiercely slammed into the courtyard wall before falling to the ground. Seeing that Yun Wan had actually attacked without saying anything, Gu Lingyao's expression changed. She immediately ran toward Xiao Chun, but unfortunately, Yun Wan acted first. She grasped at the air, and an irresistible force immediately bound Gu Lingyao's body. "What are you doing? Let me go. I don't even know you. Why are you hurting Big Brother Xiao Chun?" Knowing that she was no match for Yun Wan and did not even have the ability to resist, Gu Lingyao struggled as she angrily cursed. In response, Yin Luan said indifferently, "Because he's blocking my path. Also, you're just a vessel. Now that someone is taking back what belongs to them, you, as a vessel, naturally have no value." The reason Yin Luan attacked Xiao Chun was because Xiao Chun was blocking her path. As for Gu Lingyao, Yin Luan said that she was some vessel. Regarding this, Xiao Chun and Gu Lingyao were naturally confused. However, since things had already reached this point, Xiao Chun was even more certain that the Sacredine sect did not come with good intentions. Struggling to stand up, a cold light flashed in Xiao Chen's eyes. From the attack, just now, Xiao Chen already knew that Yun Luan's strength was extremely powerful. It could even be said that she was terrifying. Looking at Yun Luan's appearance, she should be around the same age as him. However, Xiao Chun could not see through Yun Luan's cultivation. At the same time, facing Yun Luan, even though she did not emit the slightest fluctuation of spiritual energy, Xiao Chun still felt a sense of fear. Facing someone of the same generation, Xiao Chun actually felt fear. This was definitely the first time this had happened. He had already guessed that Yun Luan was most likely the Sacredine sect's holy maiden. Facing a holy maiden for the first time, Xiao Chun finally experienced the terror of a holy maiden. Indeed, it was as Xiao Shang had said. The difference between him and a holy maiden was like the difference between heaven and earth. However, so what if she was a holy maiden? Yin Luan wanted to forcefully take Gu Lingyao away. Xiao Chun could not agree. He tightly clenched his teeth and spoke word by word. "So what if you're a holy maiden? Did I agree to take Lingyao away?" His voice was incomparably cold. However, Yin Luan only indifferently glanced at Xiao Chun and indifferently said, "I already said that you're an eyesore, right?" Saying this, Yun Luan casually waved her hand and sent Xiao Chun flying with a slap. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 664. Xiao Chun was unable to fight back at all and was sent flying by the slap. This time, Yin Luan used even more strength than before. Xiao Chun crashed into the wall of the courtyard and was sent flying out of the courtyard. Dust flew everywhere. Yin Luan had attacked Xiao Chun twice in a row. Seeing this, He Feng said coldly, "Saintess Yin Luan, don't you think you've crossed the line? Even if you're from a Sacredine sect, you can't be so presumptuous in our Tian Feng Sheng zone. This isn't the Sacredine state, but the ancient state." At this point, even an idiot could see that Yun Luan's arrival was more of a disaster than a blessing for Gu Lingyao. Moreover, Yin Luan had attacked Xiao Chun, so He Feng was naturally angry. However, Yin Luan didn't seem to care about He Feng's question. "He was the one who blocked my way. I've already been merciful by not killing him. What? Does the Great Elder want to stop me as well? I'm arrogant. Even if you're the saintess of the Sacredine sect, do you think no one in Tian Feng Sheng zone can stop you?" He Feng snorted. Yin Luan was really too arrogant. Ever since she appeared, she hadn't put anyone in Tian Feng Sheng zone in her eyes, including the Tian Feng saint. Although Yin Luan was the saintess of the Sacredine sect, she was still too young. In Tian Feng Sheng zone, let alone the Tian Feng saint, any half-saint elder could take her down. Hearing He Feng's words, Yin Luan smiled noncommittally. "What? You want to fight me? I admit that there are many people in Tian Feng Sheng zone who could take me down, such as you. However, if you dare to attack me, I believe that the next one to come won't be a junior like me, but the saint of the Sacredine sect." She admitted that there were many people in Tian Feng Sheng zone who could take her down, but would Tian Feng Sheng zone dare to? Obviously, he wouldn't dare, unless Tian Feng Sheng zone was crazy. He Feng's expression turned extremely ugly when he heard Yun Luan's words, but there was nothing he could do. It was at this moment that Yu Cheng, Lin Su, and the other personal disciples arrived one after another, perhaps because they had heard the commotion at Xiao Chen's place. Looking at Yun Luan and Gu Lingyao, as well as Xiao Chun who had been sent flying by Yun Luan, Yu Cheng and the others were puzzled. Who are these guys? She didn't seem to be from Tian Feng Sheng zone. Yu Cheng and the others naturally didn't know Yun Wan's identity. But at this moment, before Yu Cheng and the others could speak, Yun Wan spoke first. This is the direct disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong. You're just like an ant. Her words were full of contempt. Yu Cheng and the others' expressions changed drastically when they heard this. However, to everyone's surprise, not only did Yun Wan humiliate Yu Cheng and the other personal disciples, she even attacked them directly. She pointed her finger at Yu Cheng and the others. Again, she casually pointed her finger and a silver-white light flashed by. The same scene happened again. Yu Cheng and the others were sent flying by Yun Wan's finger without any ability to retaliate. Even Yu Cheng, Lin Su, and the other personal disciples couldn't block the attack. The four of them were sent flying at the same time, spitting out large mouthfuls of blood. She attacked again. Seeing this scene, Yifeng's face turned ashen. If it wasn't for his last bit of rationality, he probably wouldn't have been able to stop himself from attacking. She didn't treat the disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong as humans at all. Perhaps in Yun Wan's eyes, the personal disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong were like dogs that she could trample on as she wished. Yun Wan's arrogance was infuriating, but there was a fact that they had to admit. The personal disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong were like dogs in front of Yun Wan. She could severely injure four of them with a single finger, which showed how big the gap between the two sides was. Yu Cheng and the other three were severely injured. Wang Zong, who rushed over, also appeared at this moment. Seeing Wang Zong, Yun Wan pointed a finger again without saying a word. Seeing this, Wang Zong's face darkened. He reacted immediately by throwing out a punch, which collided with Yun Wan's finger light. To everyone's surprise, Wang Zong actually managed to block Yun Wan's seemingly invincible finger attack. Yun Wan's eyes flashed with surprise, and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly as she said with interest, "I took it. Not bad, but it's a pity that you're my way." Wang Zong was the first personal disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong. His strength was undoubtedly the strongest among the top 10 personal disciples. Following Yun Wan's words, Wang Zong didn't rejoice in the slightest. Even though he had successfully blocked Yun Wan's finger attack, Wang Zong had personally experienced Yun Wan's strength. Looking at Yun Wan with a serious gaze, this was the first time Wang Zong had such a serious expression. He muttered softly, "Saintess?" Obviously, Wang Zong had also guessed Yun Wan's identity. However, what he received in response was Yun Wan's attack. This time, Yun Wan used a martial skill, but it was only a mere high-quality Earth-level martial skill. Facing that, Wang Zong did not dare to be careless in the slightest. He directly used his special skill, a high-quality Heaven-level martial skill. The two fiercely collided, and with a muffled boom, Xiao Qin's entire courtyard was instantly razed to the ground. Wang Zong also spat out a mouthful of blood from this attack, and his body flew backwards. Wang Zong was also no match for Yun Wan. After dealing with Wang Zong, it could be said that Yun Wan had completely beaten up Tianfeng Shengzong's top 10 personal disciples with her own strength. Moreover, it was an absolute suppression. After dealing with Wang Zong, Yun Wan slowly walked up to Gu Lingyao. However, at this time, Gu Lingyao didn't pay attention to her at all. His eyes were red as he looked in the direction of Xiao Chun. In the ruins, Xiao Chun was covered in blood, and his bones seemed to have fallen apart. Even though his heart was filled with hatred, his body didn't listen to him at all, and he couldn't stand up. Yun Wan's attack just now had directly broken through his tempered battle body. He could clearly feel that Yun Wan's attack just now contained a trace of the power of loss. It was true that the tempered battle body was very strong, but with Xiao Qin's current cultivation and the mere first layer of the tempered battle body, he clearly couldn't block the attack of the power of loss. Following Gu Lingyao's gaze, Yun Wan naturally saw Xiao Chun lying in the ruins, and a trace of mockery flashed through her eyes. "He's your man, right? He's really too weak. Even as a vessel, it's a shame that you found such a weak man. Let me help you erase him." Yun Wan wanted to kill someone. Hearing this, Gu Lingyao's expression changed greatly. At the same time, Yin Wan had already stepped toward Xiao Chun. In the face of Yin Wan's approach, there was no fear in Xiao Chen's eyes. There was only a strong hatred and unwillingness. From Xiao Chen's eyes, Yin Wan could see the unwillingness and monstrous hatred in his heart. Yin Wan said indifferently, "The momentum of your desperate struggle is not bad, but unfortunately, I don't like the way you look at me, so you'd better die. Please add me to your collection, monthly vote, recommend me." In a chapter. Chapter 665. So, it's better for you to die. As she spoke, Yin Wan was already prepared to attack. At the same time, Gu Lingyao's face was already covered in tears as she shouted, "Don't hurt brother Xiao Chun. I'll go with you." Gu Lingyao cried. Xiao Sheng, who was inside Xiao Chen's body, was also ready to attack. Although his saint soul didn't have much power left and would probably dissipate if he attacked again, Xiao Sheng didn't hesitate at all. If he didn't attack now, Xiao Chun would definitely die. It was impossible to rely on Tianfeng Shengzong. Whether it was He Feng, the other half-saint elders, or the Tianfeng saint, they couldn't attack Yin Wan. Once they attacked, it would be the end of Tianfeng Shengzong. At this critical moment, a chuckle sounded from the top of Tianfeng Shengzong's mountain. "Yin Wan, you're still so violent. Do you want to kill someone just because of a disagreement? How are you going to get married in the future?" "Ha!" Yin Wan paused when she heard the voice. Taking advantage of this opportunity, a young man in a gray robe appeared in front of Xiao Chun and blocked Yin Wan's path. The young man's sudden appearance saved Xiao Chen's life. Seeing this, Xiao Sheng, who was ready to attack, let out a long sigh of relief and murmured softly, "Looks like I made it in time." Xiao Sheng obviously knew the young man's identity. To be precise, Xiao Sheng didn't know the young man. What he recognized was the gray robe the young man wore. It was because of this robe that Xiao Sheng recognized the young man's identity. The young man who appeared in time was called Chen Yu. As for his identity, he was the same as Yin Wan, but he was the holy son of the ancient saint sect. And why would Chen Yu appear here? It was because the Tianfeng saint had asked the ancient sacred sect for help. Facing Yin Wan, the Tianfeng Shengzong couldn't act against her, but the ancient sacred sect could. Not only that, the ancient sacred sect wasn't afraid of the Sacredine sect. In truth, the Tianfeng saint had been paying attention to everything the entire time. He had sent a request for help to the ancient sacred sect very early on, and after receiving the Tianfeng saint's request, the ancient sacred sect sent Chen Yu, who possessed a similar status as Yin Wan. Exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Chen Yu said with a cynical smile, "Looks like I made it in time. I say, Sister Yin Wan, I think you need to change your bad habit of killing people at the drop of a hat. As a girl, can't you be a little gentler?" The two of them clearly knew each other. Hearing Chen Yu's words, Yin Wan's expression finally changed. She said with a slightly gloomy voice, "Chen Yu, looks like the Tianfeng Shengzong really did ask for help from the ancient sacred sect. Fine, I'll give you some face and let that kid live." She instantly guessed that Chen Yu had appeared here because the Tianfeng Shengzong had asked for help from the ancient sacred sect. Since Chen Yu had stopped her, Yin Wan clearly had no intention of continuing. The direct disciples of the Tianfeng Shengzong were all ants, but Chen Yu wasn't. As soon as she finished speaking, Yin Wan turned around and prepared to leave with Gu Lingyao. Yin Wan's mission on this trip to the ancient sacred province was to bring Gu Lingyao back. The reason why so many things had happened was entirely because of Yin Wan's insufferably arrogant personality. However, when Yin Wan wanted to leave, no one saw Chen Yu appear in front of Gu Lingyao. It was as if he had teleported. As Yin Wan turned around, Chen Yu had already appeared in front of Gu Lingyao. Once again, he shielded Gu Lingyao behind him and blocked Yin Wan's path. The restriction on her body had been unlocked at some point. Finding that she had regained her ability to move, Gu Lingyao did not hesitate and directly ran toward Xiao Chun. Seeing this, Yin Wan did not stop her and allowed Gu Lingyao to pass by her. She glared at the smiling Chen Yu and shouted, Yu, what is the meaning of this? Hearing Yun Luan's cold shout, Yu replied indifferently, it's nothing. It's just an order from the sect, just like you. Yun Luan was here because of the sect's order to take Gu Lingyao away. Yu was also here because he had received an order from the sect to stop Yun Luan from acting presumptuously in Tianfeng Xingzong. Both of them had received orders from a sect. Hearing this, Yun Luan, who had an extremely domineering personality, was immediately enraged. She looked at Yu and shouted coldly, Yu, if you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Saying this, Yun Luan did not hesitate and directly struck out with her palm. This time, Yun Luan did not hold back at all. The moment she struck out, it could be said that the weather changed. She directly used a heaven-level upper-grade martial skill. Wherever the palm print passed, even the space seemed to be unable to withstand the power and began to collapse inch by inch. Rich power of law surrounded the palm print. It was no exaggeration to say that compared to this attack, Yun Luan's previous attacks were simply a drizzle. There was no comparison between the two at all. It was a complete display of the terrifying power of the saint and saintess. Seeing the eruption of Yun Luan's attack, Feng did not dare to hesitate. With a wave of his hand, he immediately led Xiao Chun, Gu Lingyao, Wang Zong, Yu Cheng, and the others away from the place. Xiao Chun and the others could not withstand such a powerful attack at all. When the time came, just the aftermath alone would be enough to take their lives. In the blink of an eye, only Yun Luan and Yu were left. Facing Yun Luan's attack, Yu's smile did not diminish. Sigh, I haven't seen you for 2 years. Junior sister Yun Luan, your temper is still so irritable. It's rare for us to meet. Isn't it good to drink and chat? Hearing this, Yun Luan replied angrily, get lost. Who wants to drink and chat with you? Yu, if you dare to stop me, let's fight. The power of the battle between the saint and saintess was simply shocking. It was almost comparable to the existence of a half-step saint. It was hard to imagine that the saint and saintess of the younger generation could be so powerful. In the face of Yun Luan's attack, Yu swept his leg out. He also used a heaven-rank martial skill. Wherever his leg passed, the ground was torn apart like a piece of paper. Cracks also appeared in the space. Moreover, a power of law that was not weaker than Yun Luan's also surrounded the leg. 2 soaring auras shot up into the sky from the direct disciples area. The hundreds of thousands of disciples in Tianfeng Xingzong were all staring at the scene. They did not know what was happening, but they could clearly feel that there were 2 chilling auras coming from the direct disciples area. Under the gaze of many disciples, there was a loud bang. Strong winds blew everywhere, and spiritual energy shot up into the sky. A powerful hurricane spread out from the direct disciples area. In just a few breaths' time, it swept across the entire Tianfeng sacred mountain, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 666. The battle between the 2 holy sons and holy daughters could not be said to be apocalyptic, but it was absolutely shocking. Following this head-on collision between Yu and Yun Luan, the entire personal disciple area was almost razed to the ground. Because it was in the center, wherever the hurricane passed, the buildings collapsed and the talisman arrays collapsed. Even the core disciple area, which was closer to the direct disciple area, was not spared. Xiao Chun and the others, who had been brought away by Feng, gasped when they saw the scene before them. Is this the strength of the holy son and holy daughter? Yu Cheng and the others learned of Yun Luan and Yu's identities from Feng. The 2 of them were around the same age as them, but their strength was world apart. This was the first time they had witnessed a battle between a chosen saint and a saintess. The shock they felt from the battle was indescribable. Previously, Yu Cheng and the others might still be proud of their identity as a direct disciple. However, after witnessing Yun Luan and Yu's prowess, being a direct disciple was nothing but bullsh*t. It wasn't hard to see this when Yun Luan single-handedly swept through all the direct disciples of the Heavenly Wind sacred sect. After the collision, as the dust slowly dissipated, Yunwan and Chun Yu's figures once again appear before everyone's eyes. The two of them did not seem to have suffered any injuries. The previous attack should have been evenly matched. Chun Yu was still smiling mischievously, while Yunwan's face was filled with anger. Their eyes met, and Chun Yu spoke first. I say, Yunwan, we don't have to continue fighting, right? It's hard to determine the victor anyway. Why don't you take your people and leave? Or come with me to the ancient sacred sect, and I'll treat you to a drink? The strength of the two of them could be said to be almost equal. If they did not take out their true trump cards and engage in a bloody battle to the death, it would really be difficult to determine a victor. However, when she heard Chun Yu's suggestion, the fury in Yunwan's heart grew even stronger. However, she did not attack again. After all, what Chun Yu said was the truth. Yunwan snorted coldly and took out a talisman from her storage ring. It was a projection talisman. It was not too rare, and its function was nothing more than to create a special image. Using this projection talisman, it could project images far away in the horizon and even transmit figures. However, the projected images were all illusory, which meant that they didn't have any attacking power. Seeing Yunwan take out a projection talisman, Chun Yu naturally knew what she was going to do. He curled his lips and similarly took out a projection talisman and held it in his hand. Both of them were acting on orders from their respective sections. Since neither of them was willing to back down, they could only let the saints of their respective sects handle the matter. At the same time, they activated the projection talisman in their hands. Then, the two talismans slowly burned. A rectangular light screen that was 5 to 6 meters tall and 3 meters wide formed in front of the two of them. At the same time, different images appeared on the two light screens. On the light screen in front of Yunwan, a beautiful middle-aged woman in a silver moon robe appeared. On the light screen in front of Chun Yu, a handsome young man appeared. Through the projection talisman, the two saints of the Sacred sect and the ancient sacred sect met. The projection talisman was two-way. In other words, not only could Yunwan and Chun Yu see the two saints through their images, but the two saints could also see everything that was happening in Tianfeng Shengzong through the projection. When the images were formed, the beautiful middle-aged woman first looked at Gu Lingyao, who was standing beside Yifeng. Then, she turned her gaze to the young man in the projection and revealed a beautiful smile on her face. Saint Qingju. The young man was a saint of the ancient sacred sect. His name was Qingju. Hearing the beautiful woman's words, Saint Qingju smiled faintly. Saint Red Lotus, isn't your sacred sect a little overstepping the boundaries of my ancient sacred state? The beautiful woman's name was Red Lotus. She was a saint of the sacred sect. As soon as she spoke, Saint Qingju spoke bluntly and glanced at Chun Yu. Seeing this, Chun Yu spread out his hands and said with an expression that said it was none of his business. Lord Sacred Master, I have no choice. Yunwan doesn't listen to my advice. I can't beat her, so I can only let you saints negotiate among yourselves. In just a few words, Chun Yu had pushed all the responsibility away. As if he knew Chun Yu's character, Saint Qingju did not say much and looked at Saint Red Lotus again. Seeing this, Saint Red Lotus still had a charming smile on her face. Qingju, at this moment, my sacred sect will naturally give your ancient sacred sect an explanation. However, our sacred sect must take Gu Lingyao away. The meaning of Saint Red Lotus's words was clear. Sacred sect could take responsibility for everything that happened today and even compensate them. However, Gu Lingyao and the others must be taken away. Saint Qingju smiled when he heard Saint Red Lotus's words. Oh, what if I say no? Then I'll have to personally make a trip to the ancient Saint Plain, the Red Lotus Saint replied without any hesitation. For the sake of Gu Lingyao, Saint Red Lotus did not hesitate to come personally. Saint Qingju's eyes flashed with surprise, but soon he seemed to have thought of something and his expression changed. This little girl, could it be? Saint Ju guessed something, but before he could finish, Saint Red Lotus interrupted him. Since you've guessed it, you should know that my Sacred sect will not give in on this matter. Guling Yao must return to Sacred sect. Other than that, everything else can be discussed. Red Lotus, Saint interrupted Saint Ju's words, but also confirmed Saint Ju's guess. After making up his mind, Saint Ju also knew that this matter was very important to the Sacred sect. It was impossible for the Sacred sect to give in. If things went wrong, the Sacred sect might really invade the ancient sacred state. Saint Ju said without much hesitation after slightly lowering his voice. If that's the case, let Yunluan take the little girl away. Haha, then I'll thank you. Don't worry, my Sacred sect will bear all the responsibility for today's matter. Sacred sect will compensate Tianfeng Shengzong double for all the losses. Saint Ju agreed to let Sacred sect take away Guling Yao, and Saint Red Lotus also promised to compensate Sacred sect double for their losses. The two saints reached a consensus, but Xiao Qin's expression was extremely ugly. In the current situation, Xiao Chun or Tianfeng Shengzong could only rely on Sacred sect. Now that Sacred sect had agreed to let Sacred sect take away Guling Yao, wouldn't there be no room for negotiation? Without any hesitation, Xiao Chun knew very well that he could only rely on the power of the ancient sacred clan. As such, he ignored Yifeng and immediately shouted, "Wait a minute. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 667. The ancient sacred sect and Sacred sect had already reached a consensus. However, at this moment someone shouted. Following Xiao Qin's shout, as expected, everyone's gaze gathered on Xiao Chun. This guy. No one expected Xiao Chun to speak at this moment. Wang Zong smiled helplessly. He was indeed too bold. At this moment, not only were Chun Yu and Yun Luan, but Saint Ju and Saint Red Lotus were also present. Even Saint Tianfeng was not qualified to speak, let alone Xiao Chun. Facing everyone's gaze, Xiao Chun's expression was firm. There was no way out. Holding Guling Yao's hand, Xiao Chun strode to Saint Ju's light screen and bowed. Tianfeng Shengzong's disciple, Xiao Chun greets Saint Ju. Facing a saint from the ancient sacred sect, Xiao Chun could not disrespect. However, Saint Ju did not get angry when facing Xiao Chun. Instead, he looked at Xiao Chun with interest and said calmly, "Who do you think you are? Do you know what kind of people are here? Even your sect master, the Heavenly Wind Saint, is not qualified to speak. How dare you speak so rudely?" "I know," Xiao Chun replied after hearing that. "Since you know, why do you still dare to speak?" Saint Ju asked. "I have no choice," Xiao Chun said. Xiao Chun knew the consequences of speaking recklessly in such an occasion. However, he had no choice but to do so. Otherwise, wouldn't he have to watch Guling Yao be taken away by Sacred sect? Compared to Xiao Chen's calmness, Guling Yao was much more nervous. She held Xiao Chen's hand tightly and hid half of her body behind Xiao Chun. Hearing Xiao Chen's reply, Saint Ju glanced at Guling Yao with a strange glint in his eyes. He then took the initiative to speak. "You want me and the ancient sacred sect to protect this little girl?" "Yes." Since Saint Ju took the initiative to speak, Xiao Chun also straightforwardly replied. At this point, Xiao Chun paused, then said seriously, "Ling Yao is also a disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong. Tianfeng Shengzong's Tianfeng mansion belongs to the ancient sacred sect. Sacred sovereign, may I ask if the ancient sacred sect rules over the ancient sacred province? Does that mean that you have the responsibility to protect the various major forces in the ancient sacred province?" "Yes," Saint Ju replied without hesitation in the face of Xiao Chen's question. "Since that's the case, Sacred sect wants to take Ling Yao away. Sacred sovereign, should the ancient sacred sect step forward to protect her?" Xiao Chun continued to ask. Knowing what Xiao Chun wanted to say, Saint Ju's answer disappointed Xiao Chun. Saint Ju said slowly with a complicated expression on his young and handsome face. Little guy, I know what you mean, but this matter cannot be done. This little girl is very important to the Sacred Een sect. If we want to protect her, we will have to go to war with the Sacred Een sect. I'm not afraid to tell you that for her, the ancient sacred sect will not go to war with the Sacred Een sect. Xiao Chan didn't know that the relationship between Tianfeng Shengzong and the ancient sacred sect wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. Saint Tianfeng was also a saint of the ancient sacred sect, and the reward of Tianfeng Shengzong was also instructed by the ancient sacred sect. To put it simply, Tianfeng Shengzong was like an outer sect of the ancient sacred sect. The disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong could be considered half a disciple of the ancient sacred sect. This was also the reason why the talented disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong would eventually head to the ancient sacred sect to cultivate. It wasn't just Tianfeng Shengzong. Other sacred sects, like the Tianyue sacred sect, could also be considered as branches of the ancient sacred sect. Generally speaking, there was only one sacred sect in the entire ancient sacred state, and that was the ancient sacred sect. The other sacred sects were all branches of the ancient sacred sect, or could be considered as outer sections. With such a relationship, the ancient sacred sect would definitely protect Gu Lingyao if it was an ordinary problem. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent you here. However, the problem now was that Gu Lingyao was far too important to the Sacred Een sect. She was so important that the Sacred Een sect would not give in even half a step. This was not difficult to deduce from the Red Lotus Saint's words earlier. Apart from Gu Lingyao having to return to the Sacred Een sect, the Sacred Een sect could agree to any request of the ancient sacred sect. This showed how important Gu Lingyao was to the Sacred Een sect. In this way, if the ancient sacred sect wanted to forcefully protect Gu Lingyao, there would only be one result, and that was a war between the two sacred sects. However, Saint Ju also said very directly that the ancient sacred sect wouldn't go to this step for Gu Lingyao. Hearing Saint Ju's answer, Xiao Chan fell silent. At the same time, Saint Red Lotus, who had been silent all this time, said faintly, "Yun Wan, bring Gu Lingyao and return immediately." Hearing Saint Red Lotus's words, Yun Wan immediately walked towards Gu Lingyao. Seeing this, Xiao Chen's first reaction was to fight to the death. Since the ancient sacred sect wasn't willing to protect Gu Lingyao, he could only rely on himself. However, wanting to rely on his own strength to protect Gu Lingyao was no different from a fool's dream. At this moment, Xiao Sheng's voice rang out in his mind. "Kid, if you make a move now, you're dead for sure. Listen to me. Let Gu Lingyao go to the Sacred Een sect first. She won't be in danger for the time being, and you can also use this time to increase your strength. Only when you become the holy son of the ancient sacred sect will you be able to save Gu Lingyao. You're just throwing an egg at a rock." Seeing that Xiao Chan was determined to fight to the death, Xiao Sheng advised, if Xiao Chan were to fight now, there would only be one result, and that was death. There was no doubt about it. Following Xiao Sheng's words, Gu Lingyao also mustered her courage and gently pulled Xiao Chen's hand. "Brother Xiao Chen, I'll go with them." With Gu Lingyao's intelligence, she naturally knew what would happen if Xiao Chen made move now. Therefore, even though she was extremely unwilling, Gu Lingyao still chose to follow Yun Wan to the Sacred Een sect in order to protect Xiao Chen. Hearing Gu Lingyao's words, Xiao Chen was stunned. However, before he could say anything, Gu Lingyao tiptoed and took the initiative to kiss Xiao Chen. After a long while, the two separated. Gu Lingyao's eyes were red as she said, "Brother Xiao Chen, promise me that you won't do anything stupid." Xiao Chen was already very clear about Gu Lingyao's intentions. Hearing this, he fell silent for a moment before nodding heavily. "Take good care of yourself and wait for me. I will definitely go to the Sacred Een sect to pick you up." "Okay." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Gu Lingyao nodded. Then, she reluctantly broke free from Xiao Chen's embrace. Holding back the tears in her eyes, She walked step by step towards Yunwan. Without the help of the ancient Sacredine sect, everything was meaningless. Gu Lingyao had made her choice. However, Xiao Chun was extremely furious. This was definitely the most humiliating moment in his life. He couldn't even protect his own woman. Please add, please vote, please recommend. If you want to chat about Swordmaster of 8 Desolation with more like-minded people, follow Excellent Literature on WeChat. Chapter 668. Not daring to turn back, afraid that he would regret it the moment he did so, Gu Lingyao walked to Yunwan's side. Yunwan pulled Gu Lingyao behind her and threw her to the 4 disciples of Sacredine sect. Yunwan then looked at Xiao Chun and said with indifference, "You are very smart. Otherwise, you would be a corpse now." The meaning of Yunwan's words was clear. Xiao Chun was smart enough not to make a move. Otherwise, she would have killed Xiao Chun without hesitation. Looking at the current situation, without the protection of the ancient Sacredine sect, Yunwan could easily kill Xiao Chun. Hearing Yunwan's words, Xiao Chun did not reply. He looked at Yunwan calmly and coldly. Seeing this, Yunwan smiled coldly and turned to leave with Gu Lingyao. He didn't roar as he had imagined, and he didn't say anything like, "I want revenge," or "I don't want to bully a poor young man." At this moment, Xiao Chun was like a ferocious beast hiding in the darkness. His pair of scarlet tiger-like eyes stared fixedly at the Sacredine sect, hoping that one day he would be able to use his own strength to wash away today's humiliation and save the woman he loved. In Xiao Chun's opinion, the oath of revenge was just the anger of the weak. He was not a match for them, so what was the point of saying all this? It was better to bury the hatred deep in his heart and use his actions to prove everything. His gaze was fixed on Gu Lingyao until she disappeared from his sight. As Gu Lingyao, Yunwan, and the rest left, Saint Red Lotus spoke from the light screen. "Within 3 days, the compensation from Sacredine sect will be delivered. Farewell, Saint Qingju." "Please," Saint Qingju said indifferently. Immediately, Saint Qingju's light screen disappeared. Saint Qingju looked at Xiao Chun indifferently, and the light screen also slowly dissipated. With the 2 saints leaving, the matter came to an end. Xiao Chun turned and left without saying a word. This matter had a huge impact on Xiao Chun. At the same time, Xiao Chun personally experienced what it was like to be stepped on. What's wrong? Can't get back up? Is it humiliating to be stepped on by others? Xiao Sheng said, "It is indeed very humiliating." Hearing Xiao Sheng's words, Xiao Chun replied softly, "Haha, it's good that you still know humiliation. Only in this way can you prove that you still have the heart to move forward bravely. As long as you don't give up, anything is possible." Hearing Xiao Chun's answer, Xiao Sheng laughed loudly. In fact, Xiao Sheng knew very well that the blow this time was indeed too big for Xiao Chun. Once Xiao Chun couldn't bear it, his state of mind was likely to be shattered. But now, it seemed that he worried too much. Xiao Chun was stronger than he thought. Indeed, Xiao Chun wasn't defeated by this blow. But ultimately, one of the reasons was Gu Lingyao. No matter how strong the Sacredine sect was, Xiao Chun wouldn't accept his fate. Because once he gave up and became dispirited, who would be Gu Lingyao? Sacredine sect was very strong, but no matter how strong they were, Xiao Chun couldn't give up. He silently prepared to leave, but unexpectedly, Chun Yu actually took the initiative to talk to Xiao Chun. With the same carefree smile on his face, Chun Yu blocked Xiao Chun's path and said with a smile, "Hee. Actually, it's not that there's no way to save your little girlfriend. As long as you can become the holy son of the ancient sacred sect, it's possible." Hearing Chun Yu's words, Xiao Chun looked at him. After being stunned for a moment, he said calmly, "Thank you for your advice." "Haha, there's no need to thank me. I'm just telling you a method. As for whether you can succeed or not, it's still up to you. However, I personally have high hopes for you. I look forward to seeing you in the ancient sacred sect one day." Facing Xiao Chun's thanks, Chun Yu waved his hand nonchalantly and smiled. Then, he turned and strode away. Because of the battle between Chun Yu and Yun Wan, the entire direct disciple area was destroyed. It would take some time to restore it to its original state. Therefore, the direct disciples could only temporarily stay in the core disciples' residence. Xiao Chen was also arranged to stay in the 5th core disciples' residence for the time being. Perhaps afraid that Xiao Chen would take things too hard, Yifeng actually personally made a trip to comfort Xiao Chen. However, Xiao Chen didn't take much of it to heart, because Yifeng was just trying to make Xiao Chen forget about Gu Lingyao. After staying at Xiao Chen's place for about an hour, Yifeng finally got up and left. Walking out of the courtyard, Yifeng sighed softly and said, "I hope this kid doesn't do anything stupid." He knew that Xiao Chen didn't take his words to heart. He sighed softly. The truth was just as Yifeng thought. Xiao Chen naturally wouldn't give up. Once Yifeng left, Xiao Chen anxiously asked Xiao Sheng, "Ancestor, you said that Lingyao wouldn't be in danger for the time being. Is that true? Did you see something? Tell me quickly." The reason Xiao Chen chose to compromise was mainly because Xiao Sheng promised that Gu Lingyao wouldn't be in danger for the time being. Otherwise, Xiao Chen wouldn't have allowed Gu Lingyao to follow Yun Wan to the Sacred sect. Faced with Xiao Chen's question, Xiao Sheng didn't hide anything this time. Instead, he calmly said, "Have you heard of the Moon God Physique?" The Moon God Physique was an extremely powerful physique. At the same time, it was also the foundation of the Sacred sect. This was because the first sect master of the Sacred sect had the Moon God Physique. Moreover, the first rule of the Sacred sect clearly stated that only those with the Moon God Physique could inherit the position of sect master. Therefore, every sect master of the Sacred sect had the Moon God Physique. However, the Moon God Physique was very unique. Only one Moon God Physique would appear in every generation. Moreover, only after the previous Moon God Physique died would a new Moon God Physique be born. Therefore, every sect master of the Sacred sect could be said to be predestined from birth. Moreover, the Moon God Physique was born in 2 people. In other words, the new Moon God Physique would appear in 2 different people. At that time, the Moon God Physique wouldn't be complete. It could be said to be incomplete. Only when one of the 2 Moon God Physiques successfully swallowed the other Moon God Physique and merged the 2 into one could it be considered a true Moon God Physique. Previously, Xiao Sheng had already seen that Gu Lingyao had the Moon God Physique. However, because it was still in the incomplete stage, it didn't display the terrifying power of the Moon God Physique. As for the Sacred sect's visit now, it was obvious that they had found the other half of the Moon God Physique and had been nurturing it. They wanted to let that person swallow the other half of Gu Lingyao's Moon God Physique. It was a very mysterious physique. After hearing Xiao Sheng's explanation, Xiao Chen's face revealed a sinister expression. Then if Lingyao was swallowed by the other half of the Moon God Physique, what would happen to her? Her body would die and her Tao would disappear. Xiao Sheng calmly replied, "The Moon God Physique was born in 2 people. However, in the end, only one person could survive. This was the special characteristic of the Moon God Physique. It couldn't be changed. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation." Chapter 669. He told Xiao Chen about the characteristics of the Moon God Physique. Xiao Chen asked worriedly, "Ancestor, how are you so sure that Lingyao's life won't be in danger for the time being?" Now that he knew why the Sacred sect wanted to take away Gu Lingyao, Xiao Chen began to worry again. He was afraid that Gu Lingyao would be devoured by the other half of the Moon God Physique. Xiao Sheng replied, "There are many conditions that must be fulfilled for the Moon God Physique to appear and devour. Let's not even talk about the first condition. One of the 2 Moon God Physiques must be at the Tao King realm. That's the first and second condition. The 2 Moon God Physiques are actually on par with each other. In other words, one of them must possess overwhelming strength to suppress the other half of the Moon God Physique and complete the devouring process. My guess is that the other half of the Moon God Physique is probably the Holy Maiden of the Sacred sect. However, even if that's the case, she definitely hasn't reached the Tao King realm. As a result, she doesn't possess the conditions to devour Gu Lingyao in the short term. Secondly, before the devouring process, the sacred insect will definitely think of ways to suppress Gu Lingyao's moon god physique in order to ensure that nothing goes wrong. This process will take a very long time. After all, how can a moon god physique be suppressed so easily? As a result, kid, you have at least 20 years to 50 years. During this period of time, you have to become the holy son of the ancient sacred insect at the very least. The sacred insect definitely wouldn't rashly allow the other half of the moon god physique to devour Gu Lingyao because it was very likely to cause a backlash. At that time, it would be hard to say who would devour who. As a result, the sacred insect had a very long time to prepare before the devouring process. At the same time, the other half of the moon god physique had to raise her cultivation to the Tao King realm. Hearing Xiao Sheng's words, Xiao Chen secretly heaved a sigh of relief. As long as there was time, everything would be fine. As long as there was time, there was still a chance. Speaking up to hear, Xiao Sheng suddenly revealed a treacherous smile. Hee kid, I have to say that you're really lucky to have obtained the heart of a moon god physique. You have to know that in the heavenly river continent, every woman who possessed the moon god physique is worthy of the title of the #1 beauty of the continent. Not only is her beauty unparalleled, but she's also extremely powerful. Back then, the moon god physique in my time, Xiao Sheng suddenly changed the topic. Regarding this, Xiao Chun obviously wasn't in the mood to talk about it. Stop. I say, ancestor, is this the time to talk about this? You little brat, what I meant to tell you is that as the saying goes, fortune comes with misfortune, and misfortune comes with fortune. This might be very dangerous for Gu Lingyao, and she might even lose her life. But on the other hand, this is also her good fortune. Xiao Sheng was no longer joking when Xiao Chun asked him to stop, and he spoke very seriously. Hearing this, Xiao Chen didn't know what Xiao Chen meant. Puzzled, he asked, Ancestor, what do you mean by this? Kid, are you stupid? Think about it. Isn't the sacred insect so important to Gu Lingyao so that the other half of the moon god physique can devour her? On the other hand, if we can reverse the situation, won't Gu Lingyao be able to devour the other half of the moon god physique? When the two fuse into one, the true moon god physique will be born. That last will definitely be a great help to you in the future. Moreover, once Gu Lingyao successfully devours the other half of the moon god physique, she will be the sect master of the sacred insect regardless of whether the sacred insect is willing or not. At that time, I don't need to say more about your position in the sacred insect, right? Xiao Sheng said with a smile. Everything in the world had two sides. Hearing this, Xiao Chen also understood this principle. However, it seemed that this was still too far away. Right now, he needed to think about how to increase his strength and become the holy son of the ancient sacred insect as soon as possible. Otherwise, if he couldn't even save Gu Lingyao, then what was the point of talking about it? After being enlightened by Xiao Sheng, Xiao Chen's mood improved a little. Since things had already come to this, the only thing Xiao Chen could do was to think of a way to save Gu Lingyao as soon as possible. Thinking of this, Xiao Chen also made up his mind to go to the Wind Plains as soon as possible and find the heavenly spiritual pool for Xiao Sheng. However, before that, Xiao Chen still needed to make some preparations. There were many things that he needed. The next morning, Xiao Chen went to Yifeng and said that he wanted to see the heavenly wind saint. In order to go to the Wind Plains, he needed the black armor talisman. However, the black armor talisman could only be obtained with the help of Tian Fengshengzong. After all, it was a saint-grade talisman. Xiao Chen was very eager to go to the Wind Plains. It was not only because of Xiao Sheng, but also because of himself. During this period of time, Xiao Chen had also looked up a lot of information about the Wind Plains. Although the Wind Plains was one of the 4 great deathlands of the Tiana continent, it was undeniable that because of its danger and lack of people, there were many heavenly treasures in the Wind Plains. There were even some unexpected opportunities. Going to the Wind Plains could not only solve the problem of Xiao Sheng, but also quickly increase his own strength. It could be said that it was the best of both worlds. As for the danger, Xiao Qian did not care about it now. When he heard that Xiao Qian wanted to see the Heavenly Wind Saint, He Feng did not refuse. After asking the Heavenly Wind Saint for permission, He Feng brought Xiao Qian to the peak of the Heavenly Wind Sacred Mountain. This was the first time they had come to the Heavenly Wind Saint's residence. It was a very simple hut, and this was where the Heavenly Wind Saint lived. When Xiao Qian and He Feng arrived, the Heavenly Wind Saint was sitting cross-legged on a praying mat outside the hut with his eyes slightly closed. "Great Elder, you go first. I want to talk to this little guy alone." Hearing the Heavenly Wind Saint's words, He Feng respectfully nodded. After He Feng left, the Heavenly Wind Saint opened his eyes and looked at Xiao Qian. "What? You still haven't thought it through? Do you think that the Tianfeng Shengzong and the ancient sacred sect are useless?" Xiao Qian did not expect the Heavenly Wind Saint to ask about this matter. Regarding this, he did not know how to answer. Seeing that Xiao Qian chose to remain silent, the Heavenly Wind Saint did not blame him and sighed lightly. "Xiao Qian, this matter is just as Senior Brother Qingju said. If the ancient sacred sect does not give in, the sacred Yin sect will definitely invade. When the time comes, the two sects will go to war, and the consequences will be unimaginable." Tianfeng Shengzong obviously knew about Gu Lingyao's secret, and also knew how important Gu Lingyao was to the sacred Yin sect. Perhaps in the eyes of Tianfeng Shengzong, Xiao Qian would never be able to see Gu Lingyao in this lifetime. Her fate was already sealed, and that was to obtain the other half of the moon god body. He wanted to persuade Xiao Qian to think things through. There were some things that you knew were impossible, but you still insisted on doing it. Otherwise, you would only be sending yourself to your death. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 670. The Tianfeng Saint clearly knew more than He Feng. He already knew that Gu Lingyao had the moon god body and knew why the ancient sacred sect had given in. What Tianfeng Saint really wanted to see was for Xiao Qian to forget about this matter. Ever since Xiao Qian joined the ancient sacred sect, the Tianfeng Saint had been paying attention to Xiao Qian and thought highly of him. He even thought that Xiao Qian might become the Holy Son in the future. Tianfeng Saint naturally did not want such a good seedling to ruin Xiao Qian's future. He wanted to persuade Xiao Qian to give up on Gu Lingyao. However, as soon as the Tianfeng Saint finished speaking, a voice that shocked him was heard. "Little Feng Feng, after so many years, you are still the same. They are in love with each other, but you want Xiao Qian to forget about that little girl. Are you trying to break them up?" As soon as he said that, Saint Tianfeng, who had been calm the whole time, was stunned. That was because Xiao Shang's remnant soul was slowly floating out of Xiao Qian's body. Although the soul was floating, the Tianfeng Saint still recognized Xiao Shang. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. "Senior Xiao Shang?" The Tianfeng Saint addressed Xiao Shang as senior. Xiao Qian was not too surprised. Xiao Shang had already told Xiao Qian about him and the Tianfeng Saint last night. According to Xiao Shang, the Tianfeng Saint was only a direct disciple of the ancient sacred sect. By chance, Xiao Shang had saved the Tianfeng Saint's life again. The Tianfeng Saint was very grateful, and Xiao Shang also thought that this kid was not bad. He knew that the Tianfeng Saint was not a bad person. In addition, Xiao Shang had saved his life before. This was why Xiao Shang dared to expose his existence. He had no choice. Now that Xiao Qian was in a hurry to go to the Wind Plains and improve his strength, he needed someone powerful to help him in secret. At the very least, Xiao Qian needed to become the sacred son of the ancient sacred sect in 20 years or 50 years. The difficulty of this was not something that Xiao Qian could achieve with his own efforts. He also needed the help of countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures. Without enough heavenly materials and earthly treasures and a good enough cultivation environment, even if Xiao Qian was the reincarnation of a god, it would be impossible for him to become the son of God, let alone a genius like him. Now, Xiao Shang was only a remnant soul and could not help Xiao Qian very much. After thinking about it, Xiao Sheng finally felt that the person who could help Xiao Chen the most was the Tianfeng saint. Firstly, he was a saint. With his power, he could give all the resources of the Tianfeng Shengzong to Xiao Chen. In this way, it would be much easier for Xiao Chen to enter the ancient sacred sect. In the ancient sacred sect, the Tianfeng saint also had a certain amount of authority and could help Xiao Chen. Most importantly, the Tianfeng saint was a trustworthy person, at least to Xiao Sheng. After considering the above reasons and weighing the pros and cons, Xiao Sheng decided to expose his existence to the Tianfeng saint. The Tianfeng saint did not expect to see Xiao Sheng again. He stood there in a daze, without any of the dignity of a saint. After being in a daze for a long while, the Tianfeng saint became excited. Xiao Sheng was the person he admired and worshipped the most. It was easy to imagine how the Tianfeng saint felt when he saw him again. He looked like an obedient child who had seen a great hero. In front of Xiao Sheng, the Tianfeng saint seemed to be a completely different person. Xiao Sheng looked at the Tianfeng saint with a smile and did not beat around the bush. He directly stated his intentions. Xiao Feng, the Tianfeng saint heard that Xiao Sheng wanted him to help Xiao Chen with all his strength from today onwards. At the same time, he also wanted to prepare all kinds of defensive artifacts and black armor talismans for Xiao Chen to go to the Wind Plains. In the face of Xiao Sheng's request, the Tianfeng saint agreed without hesitation. Finally, the Tianfeng saint asked cautiously, Senior Xiao Sheng, is this Xiao Chenyer? The Tianfeng saint was obviously very curious about the relationship between Xiao Sheng and Xiao Chen. Xiao Sheng smiled and said, My name is Xiao Sheng, and this kid is Xiao Chen. What do you think our relationship is? Xiao Sheng, this. Senior, don't tell me Xiao Chen is your son? After being reminded by Xiao Sheng, the Tianfeng saint pondered for a moment and asked in astonishment. Upon hearing the Tianfeng saint's words, Xiao Sheng shouted angrily. Scram! Xiao Chen is a descendant of the Xiao family. After revealing his and Xiao Chen's identities to the Tianfeng saint, Xiao Sheng returned to Xiao Chen's body after chatting for a while. The Tianfeng saint also started to prepare the black armor talismans and various defensive artifacts for Xiao Chen to go to the Wind Plains. At the same time, the Tianfeng saint also told Xiao Chen that in the future, all the cultivation secret realms in Tianfeng Shengzong could be used by Xiao Chen for free. There was no need to deduct any glory sect contribution points. Using all the cultivation secret realms for free was definitely a first in the history of Tianfeng Shengzong. Xiao Chen naturally bowed and thanked the Tianfeng saint. With the Tianfeng saint's help, it was naturally much more convenient for Xiao Chen. In the next few days, because he had to wait for the Tianfeng saint to collect the black armor talismans, Xiao Chen could only choose to cultivate in Tianfeng Shengzong. 3 days passed in a row. On this day, a person that Xiao Chen had expected, but he did not expect, came to Tianfeng Shengzong. He was Gu Lingyao's father, Gu Qi. Obviously, Gu Qi also knew about Gu Lingyao's situation. He sat opposite Xiao Chen in the room and said with a sorrowful expression, These things would have come sooner or later. When Ling Yao was born, I had already expected it. However, I did not expect the Holy Yin sect to act so quickly. Originally, I wanted you and Ling Yao to enter the Ancient Saints sect together, and you to become the Holy Son of the Ancient Saints sect as soon as possible. This way, perhaps the Holy Yin sect would be afraid to act. But it seems like it's still a little too late. Now that things had come to this, Gu Qi told Xiao Chen his original plan. Hearing Gu Qi's words, Xiao Chen did not say anything. After a pause, Gu Qi continued. Back then, when I forced you and Ling Yao to be engaged, it was indeed selfish. I wanted you to protect Ling Yao. Now that you know the truth of the matter, if you don't want to get involved in this muddy water, I won't blame you. Since things had come to this, no matter what Xiao Chen chose, Gu Qi would not blame him. Hearing this, Xiao Chen, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. His tone was calm, but incomparably firm. Since Ling Yao and I are already engaged, I naturally have to save her. Sect Master Gu, before Ling Yao is devoured, I will definitely become the holy son of the ancient saints sect and successfully save Ling Yao. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Gu Qi was stunned at first, but then he nodded with a gratified expression. He did not misjudge Xiao Chen back then. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 671. This time, Gu Qi didn't hide anything from Xiao Chun. He told him everything that had happened since Gu Lingyao's birth. In fact, Gu Qi and Gu Lingyao were both from the Sacredine Prefecture. Gu Qi was the same as Tianfeng Saint. He was also the patriarch of a Sacredine Prefecture. He could also be considered as a saint of the Sacredine Prefecture. However, when Gu Lingyao was born, the birth of the moon god physique was accompanied by a strange phenomenon. There were two strange phenomena on that day. One was Gu Lingyao, and the other was in the Sacredine Prefecture. In other words, one of the two people with the moon god physique was Gu Lingyao, and the other was the granddaughter of the great elder of the Sacredine Prefecture. It was ridiculous. The two people with the moon god physique were born in the Sacredine Prefecture. Moreover, the Sacredine Prefecture knew that Gu Lingyao had the moon god physique at the first moment because of the strange phenomenon. At the same time, the other person with the moon god physique was the granddaughter of the great elder. Therefore, Gu Lingyao was destined to be the other half of the moon god physique from the moment she was born. The great elder of the Sacredine Prefecture was the number one person under the patriarch. Her strength was extremely terrifying. She had the cultivation of the sage, accomplished realm. If it wasn't for the fact that the Tiana continent didn't have any source of origin energy, she might have already broken through to the quasi-sage realm. Everything seemed to have been predestined when she was born. In fact, it was indeed so. Only a month after Gu Lingyao was born, the people of the Sacredine Prefecture came to pick up Gu Lingyao. They said that they had taken a fancy to Gu Lingyao's talent. However, how could Gu Qi not know that the Sacredine Prefecture wanted to raise Gu Lingyao in captivity and wait for the right time to devour her moon god physique in one fell swoop? He was unwilling to watch Gu Lingyao be swallowed up by the other half of the moon god physique. Gu Qi was unwilling to accept this. They both had the moon god physique, so why was his daughter destined to be swallowed up the moment she was born? Instead of waiting to be captured, Gu Qi fled with Gu Lingyao. However, in the process, Gu Lingyao's mother was also killed by the Sacredine sect. Gu Qi then brought Gu Lingyao all the way out of the Sacredine continent and went to the ancient sacred continent to establish the celestial equal sect. After learning that Gu Qi was actually a saint, Xiao Chun was still a little shocked. The two of them chatted for an entire night. Early the next morning, Gu Qi left. He was going to the Sacredine Prefecture. Gu Lingyao had already been captured. If he wanted to save her, Xiao Chun could only borrow the power of the ancient sacred sect. Gu Qi did not object to this, but as her father, he obviously could not be indifferent. Therefore, he was prepared to go to the Sacredine Prefecture. If Xiao Chen's side did not succeed, then at the last moment, Gu Qi would personally rescue Gu Lingyao. Of course, the possibility of this was very low. Even if Gu Qi was a saint, trying to rescue Gu Lingyao from the hands of the Sacredine Prefecture alone was no different from hitting a rock with an egg. However, he did not have a better way. The best result was naturally that Xiao Chen's side could succeed. He let Xiao Chun do as he pleased. In the end, Xiao Chun personally sent Gu Qi off. As for the Celestial Equal sect, he had already handed it over to the first elder to manage. After personally sending Gu Qi off, Xiao Chun continued to cultivate. It was useless to think about anything now. The only way was to become the sacred son of the ancient sacred sect as soon as possible. 5 days passed. On this day, the Tianfeng saint finally summoned Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun, the Tianfeng saint, and Xiao Sheng sat facing each other at the peak of the Tianfeng sacred mountain. First, the Tianfeng saint bowed to Xiao Sheng. Then, The Tianfeng Saint directly handed over the black armor talisman and some defensive artifacts to Xiao Chun. In the past few days, the Tianfeng Saint could be said to have exhausted all his efforts to find the black armor talisman. However, because the black armor talisman was too precious and time was tight, the Tianfeng Saint only obtained 3 black armor talismans. However, this was already very difficult. After all, the black armor talisman was a saint-grade talisman. It was naturally very precious. In addition to the 3 black armor talismans, the Tianfeng Saint also gave Xiao Chun more than 10 heaven-grade defensive spiritual treasures. Xiao Chun, the wind plane is very dangerous. There are too few black armor talismans. You have to be careful when using them. These heaven-grade spiritual treasures are enough in the outer area. Only use the black armor talismans when you go deeper into the wind plane, the Tianfeng Saint reminded Xiao Chun. Hearing the Tianfeng Saint's words, Xiao Chun nodded. Then he stood up and bowed to the Tianfeng Saint. It had to be said that the Tianfeng Saint had really helped him a lot. Not only did he find the black armor talisman for him, but Xiao Chun's cultivation had also improved a lot in the past few days when he cultivated in the various secret realms of Tianfeng Shengzong. He was only one step away from breaking through to the minor success of the Dao validation realm. In terms of foundation, the Tianfeng Saint was naturally far inferior to the ancient sacred sect. However, the secret realms of Tianfeng Shengzong were indeed rare treasures. In the Tianshan continent, it was definitely an unprecedented cultivation holy land. Xiao Chun thanked the Tianfeng Saint from the bottom of his heart. The Tianfeng Saint waved his hand and said indifferently, "There's no need for that." There's actually another matter that I called you here today. There was one more thing that he wanted to tell Xiao Chun. Hearing this, Xiao Chun sat down again. The Tianfeng Saint continued. According to the latest news from the ancient sacred sect, the ancient martial arts sage assembly will be held in 3 years. At that time, all the sacred sects in the ancient sacred state will participate. This is also the best time for you to enter the ancient sacred sect and kill them all. The ancient martial arts sage assembly was a large-scale event held by the ancient sacred sect. All the sacred sects in the ancient sacred state would bring their direct disciples to participate. Every time the ancient martial arts sage assembly ended, these direct disciples would enter the ancient sacred sect to cultivate. Therefore, this was a rare opportunity for Xiao Chun. After all, if he wanted to become a holy son of the ancient sacred sect, he would first have to enter the ancient sacred sect to cultivate. Hearing the Tianfeng Saint's words, Xiao Chun muttered softly, "The ancient martial arts sage assembly. Is there still 3 years left?" 3 years was not a long time, but it was not a short time either. Faced with the opportunity of the ancient martial arts sage assembly, Xiao Chun naturally would not give up. After bidding farewell to the Tianfeng Saint, Xiao Chun did not delay any further and left Tianfeng Shengzong on the same day. In less than a month's time, Xiao Chun had experienced the greatest underestimation of his life. His thirst for strength made Xiao Chun unwilling to waste any opportunity to grow. This trip to the Wind Plains was a great opportunity for him. Of course, whether or not he could grasp it depended on himself. Outside the transportation array in Tianfeng Shengzong, Xiao Chun slowly said, "Kid, this trip to the Wind Plains might be fruitful, but you might also die in a foreign land. It all depends on you. I will definitely come back alive, and I will definitely become the holy son of the ancient sacred state." Xiao Chun reminded Xiao Chun of the dangers of this trip. Hearing this, Xiao Chun replied with determination. Strength. What Xiao Chun wanted now was strength. Gu Lingyao's departure, the strength of the Sacredine sect, and Yun Luan's arrogance were all like thorns stabbing into Xiao Chun's heart. At the same time, they also spurred Xiao Chun to continue moving forward, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.